Stand by for action.
Welcome to Truth and Consequences with Doug Poppa, episode number 33 for Monday, December 14, 2020. Before I proceed with today's podcast, I would like to share something my mother said numerous times while I was growing up. She used to say all the time, "Show me someone who fools around on their husband or wife, and I will show you a liar." Throughout my lifetime, I have found that to be absolutely true. The morals that are instilled in you during your childhood is what makes you the person you become when you enter adulthood. Just a word of wisdom here. Now, to today's podcast. Las Vegas Justice Court Judge MELANIE ANDRESS-TOBIASSON has made some very serious allegations about the now over 4-year-old unsolved 2016 Land Kaufman double homicide and about why the case is not solved, including allegations of police corruption, all or part which may or may not be true. It is my opinion that the information in this podcast could get Judge Tobiasson removed from the bench and possibly disbarred. This episode is over 2 hours long. With that, I believe what I have presented herein will confirm multiple times that Judge Tobiasson is a liar and engaged in unethical conduct that disgraces her oath of office. For more in-depth knowledge of what I will be referencing in this podcast, you may want to refer to other episodes that are available on YouTube and Facebook under the podcast Truth and Consequences with Doug Poppa. I am the only investigative journalist in the country that has been covering Las Vegas Justice Court Judge MELANIE ANDRESS-TOBIASSON and the unsolved 2016 Las Vegas Land Kaufman double homicide consistently for the past 2 years. On June 23rd of this year, Judge Tobiasson filed with the Nevada Commission on Judicial Discipline her response to the complaint filed against her by Connie Land. The title of this episode, quote, "Tobiasson takes the honor out of your honor," unquote, is based on my analysis after analyzing Tobiasson's response to the land complaint. It is my opinion that Tobiasson's written response is, in part, dishonest and deceitful. Shortly, I will explain why I believe that. Connie Land's complaint was written on December 27, 2018, and the Commission file-stamped Land's complaint on January 3, 2019. In a September 22 online article written by Dana Gentry of the Nevada Current, Gentry falsely stated that much of Connie Land's complaint against Judge Tobiasson relied on stories that I wrote, that at the time were published by the Baltimore Post-Examiner. What Gentry wrote is ludicrous, without any merit, and has no basis in fact. Had Gentry done just a little research, she would have found out that Land's complaint was filed on January 3, 2019, and that the first story I authored on Tobiasson's interview with me was published by the Baltimore Post-Examiner on January 21, 2019. I did not know who Connie Land was until late January of 2019 when I made contact with her. So, for Gentry to write that Land's complaint had anything to do with any of my stories is an outright lie. Just for the record, regardless of what anyone else thinks or writes, I was not the editor nor the publisher of the Baltimore Post-Examiner. I wrote stories from Las Vegas that were forwarded to the editor/publisher, and he took it from there. I am no longer affiliated with the Baltimore Post-Examiner. I broke off my association with that online news outlet in January of this year. My reasons for this were that the publisher decided to alter/edit certain content out of several prior published stories that have been online for months pertaining to Judge Tobiasson and the unsolved 2016 Land Kaufman double homicide, without explaining to the readers why the stories were altered and what content had been removed. This didn't sit right with me, as my name is still on as the author of those stories whose content was altered. My suggestion is that if anybody has questions on this, please refer those questions to the editor/publisher of the Baltimore Post-Examiner. Subsequently, I started my new forum for my independent investigative journalism, the podcast Truth and Consequences with Doug Poppa, which premiered on May 27, 2020, with the first episode dealing with the Land Kaufman murders. Because Judge Tobiasson meddled into the investigation of these murders with the assistance of Las Vegas Metro police detectives, by her own admission, mind you, both stories overlap, and will continue to do so until we get answers as to just what the hell is going on here. Last year, retired Las Vegas Metropolitan Police Department police officer Daniel Giersdorf reached out to me via email and stated that he wanted to talk to me about what he said were false statements that Melanie Tobiasson has made about him, that I wrote about. Giersdorf stated in that email, quote, "I spoke to News 8 in Las Vegas about this extensively. Melanie has me seriously confused with I don't know who on the department, but has been throwing my name out to the papers right and left. She has said some very salacious statements about me, which none of her accusations are remotely true," unquote. On February 22, 2019, I conducted an on-the-record recorded telephonic interview with Daniel Giersdorf. In a moment, you will hear excerpts from that interview. Before we get to that interview, to put a few things into perspective, remember from podcast episode number 31, you heard Ariane Zappia, Daniel Giersdorf's stepdaughter, talk about her claim that Judge Tobiasson offered her a bribe to change her statement that she had given to Las Vegas Metro Police homicide detectives in 2016 to implicate Shane Valentine in the Lane Kaufman murders. Ariane Zappia also talked about Judge Tobiasson telling her that her sister, Talon Giersdorf, who had committed suicide in 2017, that according to Tobiasson, her death was not a suicide, but a murder. Ariane also claimed that Tobiasson told her that Daniel Giersdorf wrongly investigated her brother, Mike Andress' death, and that it was not a suicide, but a murder. Again, refer to episode number 31 for further. Now, here is my interview with Daniel Giersdorf.
This is Daniel.
Daniel, Doug Poppa calling from Las Vegas.
How you doing?
I'm doing good. Hang on a second. I got a buzz over here. Say your word again, because I can't hear nothing now. Say
Hello?
something. Okay, I got you. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Just before we start talking, I got you to know that we're on the record and this conversation is being recorded. So I just need to inform you that because the regulations with the interstate. You have a problem with that?
No, that's fine.
Okay.
Well, Doug, my name is Daniel Giersdorf. I read you have my name in a couple of your articles in Vegas,
Okay.
and that's why I contacted you because you've been using me in these articles, and I've been reading the information, and it just hasn't been accurate what you've been printing.
Okay.
So I reached out for you just as a courtesy to kind of get you kind of straight on where you were going with the stuff.
Okay, and the information that was in the articles, I believe you talk about, is coming from Judge Tobiasson, Melanie Andress-Tobiasson. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right.
Okay. Well, like I said, when I do an interview with someone, you know, they have their opportunity to talk to me, and if other people call up and say something different, then I do that story too, and everybody knows that. That's just the way I work. I got no animosity against anybody. I got nothing. I'm an ex-cop. I got nothing. I just want to find out, what's going on. And yes, she did tell me a lot of stuff, and I did do the stories based on what she's saying, and she's saying a lot of stuff about a lot of people. So yeah, okay, tell me what what you want to say, what was wrong, what was right, how you know her, and what's going on.
Doug, I didn't really get into a lot of the specifics of the article. I didn't write notes down. I just figured I'd give you an opportunity to ask me a few questions about it and stuff, because like the things I have been reading, you've been off on. Like in your article, I read some specific things, like about how I know Melanie, and and just that for a start, I'll start with that. I met Melanie back in like 1992.
Okay.
And
in Las Vegas or another state?
In Las Vegas. We had a mutual friend who was friends with her brother. And that's how I met Mel. And her brother is Mike Andress, and he's deceased now.
Who was the person that introduced you?
His name is Mike also.
Okay.
My friend Mike and Mike Andress used to work together, and so they all knew each other. They've known each other their whole lives. These people.
Okay.
Okay. So I saw that in your article, so I wanted to just clear that up. You had printed in there about me being a vice officer.
Okay.
I was only in vice in 1996, or the first part of 97, for only 100, not even 120 days. It was a 90-day temporary duty assignment. So for 3 months I was in vice, and all that was as a temporary duty is it's brand new detectives. They go to units like that to learn how to do case submittals and case management and stuff like that.
Okay.
But you're not permanently assigned to a unit. And I never worked in vice other than that 90 days in 1996.
And were you considered a detective at that time or a patrol officer?
Well, you're considered a detective, but you're not paid as a detective because it's only a temporary duty. So you're actually still just a patrolman. You're still a policeman.
Okay. And who was running vice at that time when you were in there? Who was running vice?
That was Lieutenant Terry Davis, and was my lieutenant, and Sergeant Roy Phillips was my supervisor at the time.
Okay.
But yeah, it was only for 90 days. That's the only time I've ever done anything with vice.
Okay.
Some of the other things I've noticed that you printed in your article was about my stepdaughter, Frankie.
Okay. Okay. Frankie, right.
Right. I keep seeing in your article that someone keeps telling you that Greg Flores is my stepdaughter's godfather.
Okay.
Okay. Frankie and my other stepdaughter, Ariane, were 7 and 8 when I met their mother. They had already been baptized on their side of the family. Their real dad is Italian, and that whole side of the family is Italian. So they were baptized, and they had godparents from the time they were infants, babies.
Right.
Okay? And it's not Greg Flores. So let me tell you about Greg real quick.
So Greg Flores is not the... Because this is coming from Judge Tobiasson and this stuff. So Greg Flores is not the godfather of Frankie?
He's not the godfather of anybody I know.
Okay, go ahead.
Here's the thing. I met Greg in 2006 when I transferred to the Northeast Area Command in the patrol section. Greg was one of the squad members that was on the patrol squad with me. I was on that squad for about 6 months before I left to go to an investigative unit.
Okay.
So I only knew Greg and worked with him in patrol for about 6 months. Other than that, I've never worked with Greg or around him since then.
And did you know Greg before you moved to Las Vegas?
No, I had no idea who Greg was, excuse me, until I went to his squad in 2006. And that was the first time I'd ever met him.
Okay. Go ahead. Keep talking. I got you. I'm just taking notes.
And that was it. I was just going to tell you. I worked on that patrol squad. For about 6 months before I went to another unit. And that was my only work history with Greg.
Okay. So you're telling me, if anybody's telling me, and of course Melanie mentioned that also, that how does something like get started if she's not sure if Greg wasn't her godfather? Do you have any idea how that started? I mean, I'm just trying to figure that out because
I'm reading your stories, and the only thing I can think is that Mel just has me confused with someone else she's thinking about. Like I said, me and Mel were never close or anything. We were just acquaintances. We had hung out a couple times back in the early 90s. I went to her brother's wedding. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And, but other than that, me and Melanie never had any kind of even a social relationship. I would see her occasionally when she was on the bench and I was in her courtroom, and she would just wave at me because she recognized me. But other than that, I mean, we never even had conversation.
Were you guys ever romantically involved?
No. And I heard that too from somebody. And no, we were never involved like that.
Let me ask you this question. Yeah, let me tell you, when I do stories, when I interview people, I don't know if what they're telling me is the truth. They're on the record and they're telling me a bunch of stuff. And because of that, you do a story, just like if you're sitting on 60 Minutes. And if 3 weeks later, somebody else gets on 60 Minutes and says, well, what this person said, you see it all the time, is not true, and they set the record straight, I just can't figure out why this would be coming out. I mean, that's the missing link here is, did she do something? Did you do something to her? Or she do something to you that she's got animosity against you for some reason?
I'm thinking, and the best I could tell you is Melanie has me confused with someone else. She's got to be thinking somebody else in her head and assuming it was me. But other than that, I wouldn't know. Now, I saw in there something about her brother's death.
Right.
Yeah, okay, so let me tell you what happened that day. I was working patrol on the Northwest Area Command. That call came up in the call log, excuse me, and I saw the name on it because you read the calls when they're coming up when you're working patrol.
Right.
I knew who Mike was, and I went immediately to the scene. Now, other officers had already been dispatched to the scene. So I showed up outside the house, and the other guys were already there handling the scene, strictly because I knew who Mike was. Now, at no time did I ever enter the house, no time whatsoever did I ever have any part of the investigation. That's not allowed.
And you wouldn't, as a patrol officer, you wouldn't be investigating a death, right? You wouldn't be a death investigation. That would be the investigators, correct?
Well, you do the initial investigation and everything else from the scene. I mean, but I didn't even do that. I never even went in the house. And while I was there at the scene, standing outside waiting to get information, that's when Melanie showed up. And so I talked to Melanie for a few minutes because I was talking to Mike's wife, Luana. And then my sergeant showed up and he says, hey, you don't need to be here. Take off.
Right.
And I said, okay. And I went over to talk to Melanie to say goodbye. And when we were there, a fella that was another mutual friend of Melanie's and her brother Mike's and everything else, this guy named Johnny Ventura showed up. I know Johnny was a bad dude. He got himself in a lot of trouble. And so, and I had met Johnny before, so I knew who he was. And so I left. I said, hey, you know what? I got to go. I'm out. And then I left. I went back on patrol and handled the rest of calls for service that day.
Who's this guy, Johnny Ventura? Is he still alive?
No, he got murdered. Oh, man. I don't know, maybe 8 years ago.
What was he involved in? What was his thing?
When he got out of prison, he got arrested he was part of a group that was stealing all the ATM machines. Okay. And then burying them after they robbed them. And he got busted for that, and he went to prison. And when he got out of prison, I heard, I don't know for sure, and so it would simply be speculation, he was loan sharking, and when he went to collect, someone shot him in the back.
Holy crap. How did Melanie know him? Do you know how she knew him?
They all grew up together. Mel, her brother, my friend Mike, these guys all grew up together. They've known each other their whole lives. Right. Like I said, I never met Melanie or her brother until like right around 1992 when I was introduced to her brother Mike. Right. And then I knew him a couple times, and then I met his sister. And she went to because we all kind of went out together to the bar. Her brother Mike didn't drink, but he would go hang out. He would go get water and stuff. Right. And Mel went with us like once or twice, but that was it. I mean, other than that, there was nothing else there.
Wow. And you saw the interview that I did with and Ari and Frankie, who I've never spoke to. They're your stepdaughters, right?
Yeah, they're stepdaughters.
And you saw what Ari said in the article about that Melanie was telling her that, of course, she's talking about what you just told me about the murder, and she thought that you didn't handle the investigation right, that the brother was actually murdered, but you didn't do the investigation. You did like the initial, you're a patrol officer, you come and do the initial, and it's taken over by homicide. You would have been involved in the actual death investigation of Mike Andress, right?
I was never involved in anything. All I did was show up at the scene, and I was outside the whole time. Other officers were already there, already handled it. I just showed up because I knew Mike, and then I saw Luana's name on there because I knew his wife. I met her once before, and so I just showed up. you know, as reasonably anybody would. Your friend's dead.
Right.
You go to see what happened. And so I showed up, and like I said, Mel showed up, and then my sergeant showed up, and I had to leave. I had to go back to patrol. I had to get back to work. But I never even got on the property. I was out in the street the whole time at the perimeter.
Right. Okay. And when she's talking in the, your daughter's talking that Melanie told her she's talking about her sister's suicide that happened, I guess, about a year ago. And Melanie says that wasn't a suicide, that was retaliation. The sister that died in Utah, that was retaliation for something you did. Do you have any idea what she's talking about there?
No, but I'm going to tell you right now, this is the first and only time we're going to talk about my youngest daughter's death. Her death was a suicide.
Right.
She left a note. She used her stepdad's gun.
Yeah, we don't need to get details. Right.
There was no other reason to think anything else, especially for where she was at and where she lived and everything else. So my stepdaughter's death should never have anything to be even considered or brought up with any of my daughter's death.
So why is, because it's just not that Melanie's attacking you just on, you know, what she said about the brother and everything, but now she's talking about, you know, your daughter. What's her motivation here? I mean, I don't understand what she's trying to do here.
I think she has me confused with someone else. I really do. I mean, that's the only thing I can think about. And let me explain, and this is why I say that. The stuff that she's saying, you know, about this whole thing going on with the Vice and pimps and everything else.
Right.
I haven't been in Vice since 1996.
Right.
So why would she assume that I have anything to do with any of that if I've never even worked in that unit?
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
That's why she has me confused with somebody else. Now, a funny thing about Mel is about 4 months ago, my friend Mike, who's known her all his life, you know, like I said, and her brother, called me, and he says, "What's going on with Melanie?" I said, "What do you mean?" He goes, and he told me that his ex-wife called him and said, "Melanie's telling everybody that I'm going around and telling people that her son is my kid."
Holy crap.
Yeah.
Her son through, because she's married to a now retired Metro cop, Mr. Tobiason. I've never met him.
Sergeant Toby Tobiasson, yeah.
And she's telling some friend that you know that
my friend called me and said that she had said that I'm running around telling everybody that her son is my kid.
Jesus Christ.
That was about 4 months ago. And me and Melanie have never had any kind of sexual relationship whatsoever. We were just acquaintances. That was it.
Wow.
In like 1990, wherever your brother got married.
Right.
You know what I mean? I mean, we haven't hung out or anything since then, so you understand that.
Right.
You know? The last time I saw Melanie outside of a courtroom was at her brother Mike's funeral.
Wow. Jesus. Since the stories came out, when was the last time, did you ever speak to her? Did you ever contact with her? I mean, did you contact her when the stories came out and say, "Hey, what the hell's going on over here?" I mean, I would do that. I mean, if somebody's talking bullshit about me, I'm going to call them up and says, "What the hell's your problem? What are you doing this for?" I mean, that's what I would do, but I don't know if you did that.
Well, the only person I've talked to so far has been a civil attorney about my name showing up in the paper on these articles and stuff like that. That's the only person I've talked to as a personal attorney. The last time I saw Melanie, where I had the chance to say hi to her, was in 2009, and she was on the bench, and I was in her courtroom, and that was it. I saw her on the bench, I waved hi. My case, when I talked to the district attorney, my case had been negotiated, and I left. So I never even got to talk to Mel. She just saw me come in. I saw her. I sat down, I waved hi. She waved hi at me, but she was handling another case. And then when I went to check in with the district attorney, he says, "This is negotiated." I'm like, "Okay, I'm out." And I left, and that was it. So that's the last time I seen her was probably 2009.
And she hasn't, you or her haven't contacted each other any time to figure out? You call her up and say, "What the hell are you doing, man? What are you bringing me into? Whatever you bring me, because I don't know what she's bringing anybody into. I'm just trying to find out what the hell's going on with her." I interviewed her, and there's some stuff during the interview that other people have said that that's not true. So I don't know what the end game is here as far as whatever she's trying to do or not do. I don't know.
I haven't tried to reach out and talk to Mel or her husband or anything like that. I have no reason to. Like I said, I don't. Or the fact that I know her from an acquaintance is so distant that it would be. I wouldn't even feel right just calling her up and saying, "Hey, Mel, this is Daniel Giersdorf. You remember me?" I would have to start with, "Do you remember me?" It's been that long since I've seen her or talked to her. You know what I mean?
Wow. Has she reached out to you or anything since the stories came out and said something?
No. She has messed up with somebody else. That's the only thing I can think. I mean, and I get it that she's she's on some mission because her daughter's a prostitute. That's a hard thing for anybody to have to deal with. Especially for a judge and her husband's a sergeant, and stuff. I mean, it's even hard for me. I have a stepdaughter that was involved in the game too, and so it's a difficult thing to deal with. And I'm sure she's reaching for any direction to point the blame to something or someone, other than the fact that she's not blaming her daughter. They make a conscious effort to get in this game, But I swear she has me mixed up with someone else, because the stuff I'm reading and what you've posted so far, I'm thinking to myself, who the hell is she talking about? You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, I understand.
The reason I reached out for you was because my name keeps popping up on this, and I have absolutely nothing to do with any of this other than the fact that I am a stepfather to Frankie.
Right.
You know what I mean?
And you're not a stepfather to Ariane?
Well, I am a stepdad to Ariane, but Frankie was the original thing that I was talking about, because you're talking about Sydney and Neo. Right. Well, I've met both of them. They've been to my house. Oh, shit. They've been to my house because they came over with Frankie maybe a dozen or more times.
Right. So you knew Neo and Sydney, or you just knew Sydney?
I knew them both. They both came to the house with Frankie. They hung out together all the time. They were always together.
Frankie and Sydney?
Yeah.
What about this kid Neo that was killed? Did she bring him over there too?
Yeah, he came to my house too. He was actually a really nice kid when he came to my house. He was really respectful, and everything else. And the same with Sid. But Frankie and Sydney were always together.
Right. Yeah. I heard they were good friends together.
Yeah, and I know Frankie had told us that even when she was in custody, and that Sydney would see her once a week for visitation, talk to her, whatever. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? Yeah. Even from high school on, those two were, best friends.
Wow. Yeah. When you said that,
I think if I remember right, even I'm sorry to interrupt you. If I remember right, when Frankie moved up to Utah, he would tell us that Sydney was up there with her too. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, she would go visit and hang out with her. But yeah, they were all together. They were always together. And like I said, they would come to the house and hang out and stuff. And so yeah, we had this big island, and we had a big island in our kitchen with chairs around it.
Right.
And everybody would just come and hang out in the kitchen and sit there all the time.
We, they were killed October, I think it's 26th or something of 2016.
Right. They were at our house like 2 weeks to 10 days right in there before that. All three of them.
Wow. Okay. What about Melanie's daughter, Sarah Tobiasson? Should she ever hang out with them? Do you know her?
I've never met Sarah.
How did you know that she was a prostitute? You told me she was a prostitute.
I read about it. In your articles.
No, Melanie never said her daughter's a prostitute. Melanie said that Shane Valentine tried to make her into a prostitute, and she said, no, I'm not interested, and left. Melanie never admitted to me or anybody else, as far as I know. I don't know what she admitted to anybody else. I'm not her friend. I don't, you know.
On News 8 Las Vegas.
Right.
She did a video expo thing, and she had said on there she was a prostitute. But I don't know her. Like I said, I never even knew it. I couldn't even tell you. I don't even know if Melanie even has a son. You know what I mean?
Right. Okay.
Which was really kind of like I said, when my friend called me and said, "Hey, she's telling people that I'm running around telling everybody I'm her son's dad." Well, I didn't even know she had a son until I saw that expose thing on News 8. I'm sorry if I assumed it was you, but it was the News 8 thing that she even had a daughter who was a prostitute. So.
Yeah, I don't think she said on Daniel. I don't think she admitted on Channel 8 to daughter's a prostitute. I think she said that they tried to get her into it, and then she didn't get into it. I don't think she admitted. I got to go back and look at it. Or if she did, I got to look. But she never told me when I interviewed her. What she told me is Shane Valentine wanted her, asked her, and she left the house, and she was just concerned that at some point maybe we tried again. But I don't think she. I got to look. I don't know. I got to look at the Channel 8 interview. I don't really look at that stuff that much. I just, interested in what people are talking to me about. But okay.
You know what? It was a long time ago. Like I said, I haven't really been paid much attention to it. I know some reporter from News 8 called me and asked me all these same questions. They asked me about my Vice time. They asked me about Greg Flores. All these things. And the News 8 reporter had all the information completely wrong also. And so I talked to her for about a half hour, and I explained to her, I said, I told her the only time I was in Vice was back in 96. The only time I knew Greg was for the 6 months we worked together. She had asked me, how often is Greg coming to my house? Which I thought was kind of funny, because the only time Greg Flores has ever been to my house is when I was on that squad in patrol. They were changing sergeants.
Right.
And it was Christmas time. And normally what'll happen is the supervisor will do a Christmas party. Everybody just kind of gets together.
Right.
And we didn't have them at the time. And I volunteered to use our house for the Christmas party without asking my wife. And so the whole squad was at my house for a Christmas party. All it was is, we did dinner, we did some white elephant gifts, we kind of just hung out for a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And that was it. But that's the only time Greg's ever been to my house. And that was that would have been, God, I'm trying to think what year I left the airport. So it had to be 2007 or 2008. No, 2006. It was the same winter I met Greg. Sorry. I'm trying to think of the year because I think it was going into 2007. So it was Christmas, that Christmas.
Okay. So before you came to Vegas, because that's one of the things I think she said in one of the interviews, Tony, you didn't know Greg Flores before you came to Vegas.
No, I came back from the Gulf War. I was stationed overseas. I separated out of Nellis, and then I hired on the department 10 months later. And then I never met Greg until 2006 when I went to his squad in Northeast.
And were you guys like drinking buddies, real close, or just not that close?
No, we worked together. That was it.
Wow.
We just worked together in the same squad.
Well, this is very puzzling because I have no idea why she's saying what she's saying.
No, we never hung out together outside of work. I actually never hung out with really anybody from work outside of work. Like I said, the only time anybody had ever been in my house for my squad was the Christmas party. That was the same year, and that's just because I volunteered my house. I was the senior guy on the squad, so that's why I volunteered. I just stepped up.
Mm-hmm.
But other than that, that was it. So, like I said, I think Melanie just has me confused with someone else.
Okay, don't get off the phone yet because I'm pulling up I'm going to ask you some questions about the interview with which he mentions you, and I just want you to get your reaction to it so I can, because I'm going to put you, I'm going to do a story and fix this. Your version is going to go in to a story because it's just me. I'm not out to get anybody, so I'm going to say, listen, I talked to Daniel Giersdorf, and this is what he said. So I'm just looking. So bear with me because it's like 29 pages, but I'm just looking. I want to see what she's saying here, and I'm doing something out, and blah 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 blah, and she's because I just couldn't. She never elaborated on with me. We told me about the guy that said she told him that she was claiming you were her son's father. She never said that to me. That's the first time I heard of that. You saw the photograph that was in the last story when you guys were at the wedding, and then
Mike's wedding. That was funny. They played the bad boy theme from Cops,
right,
for Mike. So we all posed together. It
right.
was good humor.
Okay.
There's an FBI investigation into the department or Vice or whatever, like every other year. I mean, even when I hired on back in 1993, that's all you heard about was the FBI was investigating Vice or some other part of the department for something, and that was pretty regular. Even when I went to Vice for that 90 days,
right,
in 1996,
right.
Everybody was talking about it. Oh, the FBI is investigating Vice again. And so, even like I told the lady from News 8, I said to hear that the FBI is investigating Vice is like hearing that it's going to be sunny in Vegas tomorrow.
Right.
Except for right now, I guess you guys got snow. But you know what I'm saying?
Right.
I mean, so that's not that's just like anything else. That's a normal thing to hear that going on all the time. And then, like I said, for the 20-some-odd years that I was on the department, I mean, that's all you heard about. Oh, the investigation, the FBI is always looking into something for Metro. What I'm telling you is, I don't know who those guys are. I think I've met one of them, and I think it was Dosh.
Mm-hmm.
But I've never met those guys before. I don't even know them. I don't work homicide. I've never worked around them. There's 3,500 cops on the department completely.
Right.
So, I mean, but just so you know, I have no idea who these guys are.
She said that after the homicide, the double homicide, you retired 4 days later.
Did she make and I don't know if I remember reading this right or not, did she say, was there something in there about me retiring?
She's like now putting the conspiracy in there. Well, he retired 4 days later, so maybe he was involved in the murder. That's in essence, without saying it, is that what she's saying? Just
so you know, I retired on my birthday in 2015. With 22 years on the department.
Wow.
April 9th, 2015. So I believe that's 2 years before this happened. Well, listen, like I said, Doug, I wanted to just clear it up about me and the stuff I read about myself. It wasn't correct and that. So, like I said, I wanted to just kind of reach out to you ahead of time and just kind of set some things straight there. They were baptized long before I ever met their mom. And they had godparents and all that before. So,
Jesus. So what the hell is she talking about, man?
It was,
Jesus Christ.
In fact, it was Saint Joseph, Husband and Mary,
right?
Church on West Sahara. You know where that is?
I've heard of it. I may have passed it. It's up there somewhere.
That's where the girls were baptized. But their godparents are all from their dad's side of the family.
You just heard Daniel Giersdorf say that he retired in 2015, not in 2016 after the Landkaufman murders, as Judge Tobiasson told me during my interview with her on May 7, 2018. Tobiasson, in a May 19, 2018 email to me, once again stated that Daniel Giersdorf retired 4 days after the Landkaufman murders, insinuating, I guess, that had a connection to the murders. Tobiasson wrote in that email, quote, I find it interesting that the date of the affidavit of April Millard was October 29, 2016, 4 days after the double homicide they caused by outing me, and the same day that Daniel Giersdorf, stepfather to double homicide suspect Frankie Zappia, retired. Also, stepfather to Ariane Zappia, whose statement to Detective Dorsch in December of 2016, which corroborated everything the evidence had already established, resulted in her pimp, Anthony, a.k.a. Frost Galassi, finding her 2 days later when she had been in hiding for 2 months, unquote. I know this entire story that I've been on for over 2 years is convoluted and confusing, but bear with me for a minute. Tobiasson refers to the affidavit of April Millard, which was part of the case that led to former convicted pimp Ocean Fleming being released from prison and charges dropped. I covered that in a 2018 article. I have found no connection to date linking the Millard affidavit to the Land Kaufman murders. Now back to that email. I conducted a public records check, which confirmed that Daniel Giersdorf did in fact retire from the LVMPD in 2015, not 4 days after the murders in 2016, as Tobiasson claimed. There are other parts of this email that will have relevance later in this podcast. I also spoke to Daniel Giersdorf about who were the godfathers to his stepdaughters Frankie Zappia and Ariane Zappia, and you heard his response. This was brought up because Tobiasson claimed that then Las Vegas Metro Vice Detective Gregory Flores was Frankie Zappia's godfather. For the record, Flores has since been promoted to sergeant. This has relevance because then Vice Detective Flores was the detective assigned to Ariane Zappia's case against her former pimp, Anthony Galassi. If Flores was a friend of the family, that should have been a conflict of interest. Furthermore, Frankie Zappia, who Tobiasson claimed was involved in the Land Kaufman murders, was indeed a suspect along with her pimp, Dominique Thompson, also known as Damo, according to Metro Police. In April of 2017, Las Vegas Metro Police conducted search warrants on Frankie Zappia's condo at Turnberry Towers in Las Vegas, and also the residences of Thompson and several of his vehicles. The search warrants were ordered by Metro Homicide Detective Mitchell Dorsch, under the guise that it would be executed by vice detectives to, I guess, conceal the fact that they were actually looking for a firearm and other evidence that may link Thompson and or Zappia to the murders, even though those search warrants were executed almost 6 months after the double homicide. Once again, Detective Flores was involved as he executed the search warrants, including the one at Frankie Zappia's condo. As a former criminal investigator, I would have to say that if indeed Greg Flores had any personal connection to the Zappias, and now he executed a search warrant on Frankie Zappia's condo, that is extremely troubling. Now, here is an excerpt of my interview with Ariane Zappia. It conflicts with what Daniel Giersdorf told me, and it's relevant to what I just spoke about.
No, Greg Flores is not Frankie's godfather. He is her sponsor in receiving communion confirmation. But Greg Flores also was at our house all of my childhood growing up for Christmas parties, barbecues, swimming parties, etc. I grew up around Greg Flores. He should have never been the detective on my case. Greg and Dano and everybody's right. Greg Flores is not Frankie's godfather, and Melanie had the documentation to prove that because she was the first person to bring it up. I never did. She brought it up first. And wherever she gathered it from, I'm assuming is the church, because that's where they keep it, all in the big book. It's in the big book in the office. They keep it forever. You know, they've had it for decades, hundreds of years, you know. Said, and Greg is a Minnesota Vikings fan because he's from Minnesota, the same exact town my stepdad is from. They went to the same college until Daniel dropped out and joined the military, where Greg then finished college, moved to Vegas, became a Metro police officer. Daniel was in the Air Force, stationed in Las Vegas at Nellis. Then he got out of the military after a tour in Turkey, came to Vegas, retired, and became a Metropolitan Police officer. In theory, we look at him like a godfather, but that's because we grew up around him. I said, that's why I was so trusting of him to confide in him in what was going on with Anthony Galassi, and why I was so hurt that nothing was done, because I felt like outside of being a cop and, you know, him being the lead detective on my case, he knew me. He drove me to Colorado so I could get out of Vegas and go live with Shelly, my aunt. Me and my son lived out there. He's the one who took me there.
Well, that was an eye-opener. I have said this before. Somewhere in all of this, the truth lies. The Las Vegas Metro Police investigation into the now over 4-year-old unsolved murders of Sidney Land and Nehemiah Kaufman was compromised the minute the police released confidential details about the investigation to Tobiasson. Tobiasson had prior involvement with one of the suspects, Shane Valentine, who Tobiasson presided over in cases involving Valentine. Tobiasson, by her own recorded admission, threatened Valentine through his attorney and went to his house and kicked in his door. Tobiasson's daughter, Sarah, also had an involvement with Valentine. She went over his house to obtain a counterfeit ID, at which time Valentine allegedly attempted to recruit her into prostitution, according to the judge. Sarah Tobiasson, again according to Judge Tobiasson, was friends with Nehemiah Kaufman, one of the victims in the double homicide. You heard in previous podcasts audio excerpts from Judge Tobiasson's recorded interview with me, in which she admitted numerous times that she was receiving confidential information, including details of DNA evidence related to the murders from the original detective on the case, who she later identified in an email to me as Las Vegas Metro Police Homicide Detective Jared Grimmett. You also heard Judge Tobiasson say that the murders happened on October 26, 2016 at 12:30 a.m., 8 hours after she was outed as a source of information by Las Vegas Metro Police Vice Detective Justine Gaddis to Las Vegas Metro Police Officer Clarence Ty Bowden and his daughter Allie, Sarah Tobiasson's best friend, according to the judge. Tobiasson claimed that Allie Bowden was a prostitute for Shane Valentine, who then at some point had switched over to Nehemiah Kaufman. Tobiasson claimed that the murders happened because Allie put out a tweet that she had been brought in and questioned by Vice, which resulted in the murder of Sidney Land and Nehemiah Kaufman, and that the wrong two people were killed, that it was meant to be her and her daughter Sarah. The following year, in 2017, Allie Bowden, in a text message to a friend, stated that her father, Las Vegas Metro Police Officer Ty Bowden, wanted to kill Shane Valentine and spend the rest of his life in prison. Why would her father make a comment like that? I reached out to him last year and never received a reply. More on that whole thing in a future podcast. Tobiasson said that the police had all the evidence to arrest Shane Valentine, Frankie Zappia, and Dominique Thompson for the murders, but failed to do so because there was a cover-up and evidence could have been destroyed. All of that and much more came out of the mouth of Judge Tobiasson. Tobiasson inserted herself into the criminal investigation of a double murder for reasons we do not know, and with the help of the police. And as a result, both of them compromised the integrity of the investigation. Before I get to Judge Tobiasson's written response to the Connie Land complaint, here is a short excerpt from my interview with Tobiasson.
These murders happened. The first detective who is investigating the case, thank God, is someone who knows me and respects me and I have a good relationship with. He tells me for the first 3 or 4 weeks after the murders, while Shane Valentine is on the run, what information they have and what proof they have that Shane's involved. And they have his phone pinging at the apartment. And then what happens is after the murders, the phone is turned off almost immediately. And then the next time his phone is turned on, it's in Baker, California. Apparently Neo never deleted his texts. And there's text messages between Neo and Shane. There's text messages between Allie and Neo confirming that she has an involvement with Neo, prostitution-related involvement with Neo. And there are many, many, many other text messages on this phone, but I'm advised of this by the detective working the case, that they have this information. I'm told that they have Domo's DNA, that Frankie's phone pings at the apartment, that they caught Frankie in all kinds of lies. And one of the most significant things is that after the two are dead, nobody ever texts them again.
Right.
They never sent another text. So there's a lot more information about how they know that Shane's involved, but they know. So Shane gets arrested in California. He gets extradited back to California, or back to Vegas. He gets charged with the drive-by shooting, and I find out from the homicide detectives that there are 4 other, now mind you, he's been out on bail on a burglary charge since May, and then the murders are committed in October. There were 4 other burglary cases that were sitting in the DA's office that had DNA and fingerprints that tied Shane Valentine to those burglaries that they never filed. Nobody has been arrested in the murders. I told you that. He was a suspect in the murders. They have all the evidence they need to make arrests in the murders. I told you about the detective who was originally on the case, who told me all the evidence they had that showed it was Shane, Domo, and Frankie. The minute they found out I was talking to the FBI, they do a press conference saying he's not a suspect. The problem is they don't know that I know what evidence they have. Chances are they've destroyed it by now. Now they're trying to cover up the homicide where Shane Valentine is a suspect.
That recording was from my May 7th, 2018 interview with Judge Tobiasson. Just to reiterate here, you just heard Tobiasson say that she was getting confidential information about the murders from the original detective on the case, who I said before she identified as homicide detective Jared Grimmett. You heard her say that the police had all the evidence to make arrests in the case, and that the police are covering up the homicide. Once again, remember, Tobiasson told me that in May of 2018. It's important to remember that, as I will explain in a moment. Now, to Judge Tobiasson's response to the land complaint that Tobiasson filed with the Nevada Commission on Judicial Discipline in June. Tobiasson confirms, now in writing, that she was indeed receiving confidential information from the police related to the Land Kaufman murders as follows, referring to our contact with Connie Land. Quote, "We first made contact on May 7, 2017 via Facebook Messenger. Prior to that date, I had been in contact with LVMPD personnel who had told me that it was their belief that Shane Valentine was involved with her daughter's death. At no time did I have personal knowledge that LVMPD was not investigating the double homicide, but I did express my subjective belief, as a similarly situated aggrieved mother, that there seemed to be some LVMPD officers who were protecting Shane Valentine and his associates, and that corruption might be involved. On the morning of October 29, 2016, after learning of the double homicide, and motivated by concerns for the safety of my daughter and myself, I spoke with LVMPD homicide detective Grimmett and was advised by him that Shane Valentine was a suspect in the double homicide, that LVMPD had cell tower data and other information tying him to the event, and that it was believed that he fled to California shortly after the homicide. I am quite certain that I told Connie Land of this during our discussions the following year. Though the October 25, 2016 interview with Ms. Bowden took place a mere 8 hours prior to the murders of Sidney Land and Nehemiah Kaufman, Ms. Land's belief that they are connected is speculative, and I certainly have no knowledge as to whether the timing of the interview is in any way connected to or to the cause of the murder. I did continue to receive information from Detective Grimmett for a period of time after the double homicide. He later told me the information he had given me was incorrect. That was long before I ever met Connie Land, and I strongly doubt that I told her that she could trust Detective Grimmett but no one else at LVMPD. I certainly have no memory of having said that to her. Vice Detective Flores and Homicide Detective Grimmett, independently of each other and contemporaneously with the event, shared with me that Ariane Zappia gave a statement to Homicide Detective Dorsch in which she identified Shane Valentine, Frankie Zappia, and a man named Damo as participating in the double homicide. Both detectives, as well as Connie Land, said that Detective Dorsch was attempting to discredit her statement. I did not attempt to bribe her, nor would there have been any reason to ask her to change her statement to homicide, since it was, is, and always has been my understanding that at the time she provided her statement to Detective Dorsch in December 2016, she had, in fact, already implicated Shane Valentine. That was what I had been told by Detectives Grimmett and Flores in December 2016. What does Judge Tobiasson's concern for her daughter have to do with Detective Flores and Detective Grimmett releasing confidential details about the homicide investigation to Tobiasson? One has nothing to do with the other. Did both of these detectives document this in a report? And did they inform their supervisor at the time that they released this information to a third party who should not have been privy to this information? I believe this is also a violation of departmental policy in the least. If Judge Tobiasson is not a pathological liar, then like I have said before for quite some time, the investigation of the Land Kaufman murders was compromised by the police. I couldn't even begin to speculate what their motives could have been. Tobiasson wrote that the information that Grimmett provided to her, he later told her that that information was incorrect, and according to Tobiasson, Grimmett told her that well before she ever met Connie Land in May of 2017. So, if that's the case, then why did Tobiasson tell the story she told me in May of 2018 if the information she had received from Grimmett was incorrect? It is my opinion that Judge Tobiasson is not being truthful, either in her written response to the commission and or what she told me about the Land Kaufman murders during my interview with her in May of 2018. What Tobiasson told me in that interview was not speculative belief. She said Detective Grimmett gave her the information, period. According to Tobiasson, both Detective Grimmett and Detective Flores both told her independently the contents of a statement that was given by Ariane Zappia to Homicide Detective Dosh in December of 2016. What right did Tobiasson have to receive this information? Information that would never have been disclosed to a private citizen. Yet apparently, because of Tobiasson's position as a judge, the police just gave her that confidential information, and in doing so, compromised a now 4-year-old unsolved double homicide. Tobiasson wrote in her response in reference to Allie Bowden and the interview with Vice, where Tobiasson was outed as a source of information to Allie and her police officer father, quote, "Though the October 25, 2016 interview with Ms. Bowden took place a mere 8 hours prior to the murders of Sidney Land and Nehemiah Kaufman, Ms. Land's belief that they are connected is speculative, and I certainly have no knowledge as to whether the timing of the interview is in any way connected to or the cause of the murder," unquote. Really? During my interview with Tobiasson, she told me the complete opposite. Tobiasson told me that the murders had everything to do with her getting outed to Allie Bowden. So, Tobiasson is either not telling the truth in her written response, or she lied to me during my on-the-record recorded interview with her in May of 2018. Also, remember that May 19, 2018 email that I discussed earlier? And please refer to the screenshots in this podcast. That email was sent to me by Tobiasson over a week later, after the interview with her. She solidifies what she told me in the recording, quoting from that email, 4 days after the double homicide they caused by outing me, unquote. So much for the honor in your honor. Here are a few excerpts from that interview. You be the judge here, no pun intended. What do you think?
So that night, unbeknownst to me at this time, Allie leaves my house and she puts out a tweet about the fact that she was called in and questioned by Vice. Mm-hmm. Okay? Now, unfortunately, at this point, Allie was no longer associated with Shane Valentine. She was associated with Neo Kaufman. And like I said, they had had a beef because Shane was upset that Neo was taking Shane's goals. Okay? Mm-hmm. So that night at about 12:30, so it would have been 12:30, October 26th, 12:30 a.m., Shane Valentine, the guy by the name of Dominique Thompson, he went by Domo, D-O-M-O, and a girl by the name of Frankie, F-R-A-N-K-I-E, Zappia, Z-A-P-P-I-A.
What was Dominic's last name?
Thompson.
Thompson? Okay.
It's Dominique.
Dominic?
Thompson. Dominique. Q-U-E at the end.
That's a male, right?
Dominic.
Okay.
It is a male. He's a pimp. His name's Domo. D-O-M-O.
Okay.
Shane, Domo, and Frankie, whose stepdad is a police officer by the name of Dano, D-A-N-O, Giersdorf, G-I-E-R-S-D-O-R-F. Go to Neo's house and execute Neo and his girlfriend, Sidney Land, whose dad is a fire captain.
Okay, wait a minute. Oh, hang on, I'm losing here. Who's Daniel Giersdorf?
Dano?
Right.
Dano.
Right.
Giersdorf is the stepfather of Frankie Zappia, one of the suspects in the double homicide that happened 8 hours after I was outed as a source of information to one of Shane Valentine's prostitutes who had left him and was now working for Neo. 8 hours later, her new pimp is killed by her old pimp because she puts out on Twitter that she had been called in and interviewed by Vice. They know, and everyone else knows, that this murder happened as a result of what they did that day.
So has anybody been indicted for this double murder?
No, that's what I just said. They're covering it up. And they know that the fact that they outed me got 2 people killed. They weren't the 2 people they were trying to get killed, me and my daughter, but it got 2 people killed.
In paragraph 6 of Judge Tobiasson's response, she states, quote, "As to the remainder of Ms. Land's assertions in this paragraph, I have no idea as to her source of information, but it wasn't me." In her complaint, Land wrote, quote, "Shane Valentine has known affiliations to Kingpin Pimp, works under Molly Mall, Jamal Rashid," unquote. Tobiasson said she had no idea of the source of the information to Land, but it wasn't her. However, this is what Tobiasson told me during my interview with her.
You got Molly Mall paying off these cops to protect his people and his girls and go after the other pimps.
Right.
Shane Valentine works under Molly Mall, so he's protected. They had opportunities over and over and over. I mean, he didn't even get charged in the case with the other judge's daughter where he was there and he was directing her beating.
And why do you think it is? Why do you think he's protected?
Because he works for Molly Mall. He's protected. They've been paid to protect him.
Okay. The cops.
Yes.
By Molly Mall.
I mean, you're never gonna get them to say that. But
Yeah.
he works for Molly Mall. He is associated with Molly Mall.
In paragraph 8, Tobiasson states, quote, "2 days after Gaddis disclosed my identity as a source of information to Ali Bowden, Neo Kaufman and Sidney Land's bodies were discovered. I did disclose to Connie Land, and I did opine to her my belief that the disclosure to Ali Bowden was retaliatory toward me. I first reported on this last year after reading a text message that was sent by Homicide Detective Mitchell Dorsch to Connie Land on September 20th, 2018, that stated, quote, "That interview was done by Vice detectives who outed the judge in the interview. We believe that's when the judge became furious with the department and her tone changed and she would not even allow us to interview her daughter," unquote. If then Vice Detective Justine Gaddis did out the judge as was stated, Gaddis should have been fired, period, amen. As a police officer, you do not dime out a confidential source of information to anybody. It could end up in that person being seriously injured and or killed. I don't know why any police officer would do something like that. The Las Vegas Metro Police never responded to my request last year for comment on this matter. Vice Detective Justine Gaddis was transferred to, of all units, the Homicide Bureau sometime after this happened. I do not blame Tobiasson for being upset about this one. That being said, I do not have all the facts, and Tobiasson's credibility with me is quickly reaching groundhog level. For time purposes, I'm going to cover just a few more of Tobiasson's responses in this podcast. I will have further comments on this in a future episode. Judge Tobiasson mentions in her response that she had a conversation with an adult female, who I will not identify, who told her that when she was a young girl she was the victim of sexual molestation. Why this is in Tobiasson's response, I do not know, since nothing like that is even mentioned in the Land complaint. I think that it's disgraceful and unethical for that to be mentioned here. Contrary to that, Tobiasson doesn't disclose in her written response is that she also released that information to a third party, where once again Tobiasson mentions Detectives Gregory Flores and Jared Grimmett. I have possession of a text message where Tobiasson states to a third party, quote, "How did Flores know? Fuck, who told Grimmett?" Unquote. In paragraph 10, Tobiasson states, quote, "I strongly doubt that I told her that she could trust Detective Grimmett but no one else at LVMPD. I certainly have no memory of having said that to her. Connie Land told me, and she stated numerous times to other police personnel in text messages, that Tobiasson told her that she could only trust Detective Grimmett and not Detective Dosh. In paragraph 12, Tobiasson states, quote, I had no idea what was occurring with cases against Shane Valentine until I learned about it from Connie Land on the evening of October 6, 2017. She called me that night to advise me that the cases were being negotiated and that she was petitioning against a plea negotiation and asking the public to contact the district attorney's office opposing the plea deal, unquote. Tobiasson knew exactly what was going on with Shane Valentine because she told me that she received information from the police, not only about the double homicide, but also about Valentine's involvement in burglaries, information that would not have been available to a regular citizen, including information about Valentine that was in the possession of the district attorney's office. Listen to the short audio excerpt of my interview with Tobiasson.
February of 2016, Shane Valentine is caught on video very, very close to my house doing a residential burglary. When he wasn't pimping out girls or selling dope, he was burglarizing houses, and in fact, a lieutenant at Metro at one point had told me that they thought he was good for at least 600 burglaries. I said, he's out on bail on a burglary charge. He's got multiple felony convictions from when he was a juvenile and certified up as an adult. He's pimped out one judge's daughter. He's pimped out multiple police officers' daughters. He tried to pimp out my daughter. Now, mind you, he's been out on bail on a burglary charge since May. And then the murders are committed in October. There were 4 other burglary cases that were sitting in the DA's office that had DNA and fingerprints that tied Shane Valentine to those burglaries that they never filed. He's out on bail on a burglary. They closed a drive-by shooting case that they knew he did. And they got 4 other cases where they have DNA and fingerprints, and they don't file and revoke his bail. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Then there's a lieutenant who tells me that they believe he's good for 600 burglaries during that time frame where he was out on bail. That lieutenant it was actually a captain, Captain Raybuck, Todd Raybuck.
Judge Tobiasson is being deceptive in her response. She did indeed provide information to Connie Land concerning Shane Valentine that Land never knew, and provided information about Valentine so Land could use it in an email to the district attorney and in her petition. Just about all of what you heard Tobiasson say in that recording from May 2018 is the same information she provided to Connie Land in 2017, and that is confirmed in text messages between Tobiasson and Land that I will read at the end of this podcast. For the record, much, not all, of what Land wrote in her complaint is corroborated in their text communications, irregardless of what Tobiasson says in her written response. In paragraph 12, Tobiasson states, quote, we became aware that Adam Gill was the special prosecutor on a sex trafficking case in which the district attorney's office had a conflict of interest, and that he also represented Shane Valentine in several of his cases, which appeared to create a conflict of interest because of the parties involved in the case in which he was acting as the special prosecutor. We were also told that Adam Gill and Clark County Deputy District Attorney Mark DiGiacomo are best friends. I have no personal knowledge as to the relationship between CDDA Giacomo and Adam Gill. In a text message, Tobiasson told Land that she hates Mark DiGiacomo. In a May 13, 2018 email message to me, Tobiasson wrote, quote, can't wait till round 2 when it can be pointed out that Gill and DiGiacomo are best friends who golf regularly and socialize frequently with the pictures and theorize that he was chosen to be the special prosecutor by the DA's office so they could control what happened with the Ocean Fleming case, despite the fact the DA's office had to conflict off because people in their office were involved in the corruption. This was proven to in fact be the case when during plea negotiation meetings with Ocean's attorneys, Mr. Gill boldly or stupidly stated that he would have to have a meeting with Mr. Wolfson and Mr. Daskis before he could enter into any negotiations. In paragraph 15, Tobiasson states, quote, I did share with Connie Land that I was in contact and speaking to Special Agent Kevin White, FBI, but at his request, I never shared his name with her. I never told her that the investigation that he was conducting was with regard to our daughter's murder, nor did I ever tell her that the FBI had taken over the investigation of her murder. There's a text message that tends to support Land's assertion that Tobiasson told her that the FBI, her FBI friend, was going to investigate the murders. Also, Connie Land told me that almost immediately after she made contact with Judge Tobiasson in May of 2017, Tobiasson described him as her, quote, friend, unquote, and when Land identified him in a text message, Tobiasson responded saying maybe we should not say what he does. I am perplexed by that because when the Judicial Commission's investigator interviewed Special Agent White, White states, according to the transcript that I have, that he did not make contact with Tobiasson until late or fall of 2017. In paragraph 5 of Connie Land's complaint, she writes, quote, she, meaning Tobiasson, provided all of the information she discovered regarding Shane Valentine to vice detectives to issue search warrants for Shane. Tobiasson's response to that is, quote, nor have I ever requested a search warrant from LVMPD regarding this subject. I merely provided information when I received it. Tobiasson was upset that the vice detectives did not do a search warrant on Shane Valentine's house. She told me that during the interview with her in May of 2018. Here is a short excerpt.
Nobody ever attempted to get a search warrant for his house, despite the fact that there was, there were people who could say they saw guns and drugs, etc. in the house.
Remember from my interview with Judge Tobiasson, it was her daughter Sarah who was inside Valentine's house trying to buy a counterfeit ID. Sarah saw the guns and drugs in the house. She didn't want her daughter talking to the police. You can't get a search warrant on hearsay information. She's a judge, she knows that. In paragraph 16 of Connie Land's complaint, she states, quote, the judge informed me I was being watched and followed by the police, and my life was in jeopardy. She suggested getting burner phones to continue to communicate. She told me she needed every email, text, phone records, everything I had on my case, and communications with my detectives. She needed to give it to her FBI friend. I gave her copies of everything I had, including communication with my homicide detectives. I trusted her, unquote. Just about all of what Land said is backed up in text messages. Further, when I interviewed Judge Tobiasson in May 2018, she told me that she personally has all the text messages between Detective Dorsch and Connie Land. She didn't tell me in that interview that she turned anything over to the FBI. She said she had possession of them. Listen to this.
I have all the text messages between him and Sidney Land's mom.
In Tobiasson's response, she says, quote, I did tell Ms. Land that I was concerned that our conversations were not secure. I had been advised by Agent White to obtain different phones on which to communicate. If you recall from my interview with Judge Tobiasson, where she was talking about FBI Agent White and burner phones, she said this.
The FBI agent personally said that he then gave me a burner phone that he bought because he didn't want one in my name. We then spoke on burner phones. And let me tell you something, I never had a burner phone in my life until I talked to the FBI. I go, the only reason I've ever had a burner phone is so that Metro and the FBI wouldn't know I was talking to an FBI agent. That's why I have a burner phone.
According to the transcript I have, when Agent White was interviewed by the Judicial Commission's investigator, Adam Wignansky, he asked White if Tobiasson was communicating with him on burner phones. Agent White replied, quote, I don't know what kind of phone she was using, unquote. In October of 2017, Tobiasson also had a burner phone that was purchased by Connie Land because Tobiasson had told Land that the police were watching her like a hawk, and they needed to communicate on burner phones. That is confirmed in text messages that I will read later on. Tobiasson also said this about FBI Agent White during my interview with her.
The FBI agent that I was talking to he will not talk to me. He's so afraid to talk to me because he knows he'll get fired or listen, he's as mind blown as I am. He's afraid to talk on his phone, his work phone, because he doesn't trust the other agents he works with. He and I talked at length. We would meet at churches and libraries so we could talk. He was terrified to be seen with me in public because he knew they wouldn't want me talking to him.
According to the transcript, when Adam Wignansky was interviewing FBI Special Agent Kevin White, he asked White, quote, "Did you ever tell Judge Tobiasson that you could not trust any agents that were assigned to the FBI Las Vegas office?" Unquote. Agent White replied, "No." Wignansky then asked White, quote, "Judge Tobiasson mentioned that she would meet with you in various locations, to include churches and libraries, because you were afraid to speak with her in public. Does that make sense?" Unquote. White replied, quote, "I mean, if that's what she said, I guess that was her opinion. I can't speak on what she believed." Unquote. Wignansky then asked White, quote, "Okay, were you afraid to meet with her in public?" Unquote. White responded, "No." Based on that, then someone is not telling the truth. Either FBI Special Agent Kevin White lied to Wignansky, or Las Vegas Justice Court Judge MELANIE ANDRESS-TOBIASSON lied to me during our on-the-record recorded interview on May 7, 2018. On a separate note, Judge Tobiasson told me in a May 2018 email that Clark County District Attorney Steve Wolfson meddled into the then FBI corruption probe involving pimp Jamal Rashid, a.k.a. Molly Mall, by calling someone at the United States Attorney's Office for the District of Nevada. In the email, I said, quote, to Tobiasson, "How sure are you with your source that Wolfson did in fact contact the United States Attorney's Office?" Tobiasson replied, "Absolutely, but they will never admit it. Unfortunately, I don't know exactly who he called, but I know he did." Of course, when I received that information, I followed up by requesting comment from Wolfson's office and the United States Attorney's Office here in Las Vegas. As usual, no reply. Whether there was any validity to what Tobiasson told me, I don't know, but I find it interesting that the Rashid case ended up with him getting a sweetheart deal by the U.S. Attorney's Office, similar to the sweetheart deals local pimps have been getting over the years from the Clark County DA's office. In episode number 31, you also heard Ariane Zappia talk about an alleged bribe offered by Judge Tobiasson. In her response to the complaint, Tobiasson wrote, quote, "I met with Ariane Zappia on October 22, 2017 at 7:30 p.m. I did not attempt to bribe her. Please refer to the screenshots in this podcast to review Tobiasson's written response. I have not included everything in my audio commentary that is contained therein for time purposes. I also haven't covered everything. That will be done in a future podcast. October 22nd, 2017 is also the date that Tobiasson said she had the meeting with Las Vegas attorney Jess Marchese in his office when she discussed Ariane Zappia, Connie Land, and the FBI with one of Marchese's clients whose identity is not known to me. I covered that in episode number 32. Tobiasson said that around the same time she had the meeting with Marchese, then Vice Detective Al Bias showed up in her office twice in one day. In an October 18, 2017 text message to Connie Land, Tobiasson states, quote, "Guess who showed up in my office twice today? Al Bias," unquote. That would have been 4 days before her meeting with Jess Marchese. Back to the meeting about the bribe. Ariane Zappia stated to me during my interview with her that the meeting with Tobiasson occurred at the Oh My Sushi restaurant in Las Vegas. Refer to the screenshot, which is Ariane's cell phone screen allegedly from October 22, 2017, and the following day. Tobiasson texted Zappia on October 22, 2017, and wrote, quote, "I'm going in the sushi place. It's called Oh My Sushi by Wahoo's," unquote. The next morning, October 23, 2017, a message from Tobiasson. "You up?" Zappia replies, "Yes." At 2:22 p.m., Zappia texted Tobiasson, quote, "I actually got a lawyer. I'm very concerned about a lot of things. So now everything will have to go through him, but I did tell him about you. So you can ask him questions and he will prove me to answer them." In paragraph 36, Tobiasson states, quote, "This entire paragraph is complete nonsense. I do not know anyone in Ariane's family other than Ariane and Daniel Giersdorf. I have no idea who our grandmother is, either by name, phone number, address, or any other identifying information, and I have never spoken with her. I have no idea of this audio tape recording that Ms. Land contends that I played for Ariane's grandmother. I never played a tape recording to anyone of someone else's voice and represented it as the voice of a different person. The text messages presented as supporting this allegation, in fact, appear only to illustrate that Ms. Land is making an obvious attempt to fabricate something to support this blatant lie. That is stated and intended to be stated as an absolute that permits no exception, unquote. Tobiasson goes on in her response, quote, I have never had any romantic or physical involvement with Daniel Giersdorf and am disgusted by the thought that someone would say I did. I have one son who is my youngest child, and Daniel Giersdorf is not, nor is there any possibility that he could be, his father, and this suggestion, allegation, and blatant lie is clearly put forth only to disrespect, humiliate, embarrass, and defame me and my family, unquote. Just when you thought things couldn't get any more convoluted, they do. Reference her son, you heard Daniel Giersdorf say that he was told by a close friend that Tobiasson herself was going around saying the same thing. Giersdorf denied ever having a romantic involvement with Tobiasson. I will now play a short audio excerpt from my interview with Ariane Zappia, where she discusses a woman who identified herself as Tobiasson and spoke to her grandmother, Paulette Zappia.
Well, my grandma tells me, which later my grandma texted to Connie, but my grandma tells me that Melanie Tobiasson called her and played her an audio recording of Connie telling the judge that I'm a prostitute and on drugs, and that Connie believes that Shane killed Sydney. This is a recording that supposedly Melanie played for my grandma. That's supposedly Connie is what I mean by supposedly, and my grandma's like, you can't stay here anymore. I told you you needed to do the right thing. You're failing your son. You're out there. And that Craig was actually my pimp. That was all that was said to Melanie. That was supposedly from Connie. That was in an audio recording to my grandmother. And my grandma ends up texting Connie and tells Connie that, all that the judge, and she addresses the judge by her name, Judge Melanie Tobiasson, in these text messages. My mom calls me, and she's like, Judge Tobiasson is at it again. She's saying all these things. She's telling people that Dano is the father of her oldest child, and just, all this shit. And she's like, my mom's freaking out on me. She's like, fuck you for telling the judge anything about our family. Like, I didn't tell Melanie anything about our family. Melanie has told me about our family. Like, I don't know where all this shit is coming from.
Anyone can call anybody else and identify themselves as another person, specifically if the party being called is unfamiliar with the voice of the person calling. With that, there are investigative methods that can be taken to determine if one person called another. Tobiasson wrote in her response, quote, the text messages presented as supporting this allegation, in fact, appear only to illustrate that Ms. Land is making an obvious attempt to fabricate something to support this blatant lie, unquote. That is an assumption on Tobiasson's part. However, the fact is that the text messages between Paulette Zappia and Connie Land are in fact genuine and not fabricated. Please refer to the screenshot. On August 10, 2018, Paulette Zappia did contact Connie Land and they communicated via text messages. Land, the last time I spoke with Ariane was when she called me to tell me Judge Tobiasson called you with the fraudulent tape involving me. I would love to hear more on that one, though. Zappia replied, Judge Tobiasson, I am unsure of what you're speaking of, as I swore not to say anything about it. Land responded, in reference to Judge Tobiasson, I was informed she played a recording very broken up and muffled in which she stated it was me speaking. I was referencing my daughter's murder, Shane Valentine and Ariane. It is unfortunate you have sworn not to say anything about it. Zappia replied, yes, the recording stated that you knew Ari worked for Shane or whatever his name is. Now, I will get into the text message communications that occurred between Judge Tobiasson and Connie Land. These also are not fabricated. Again, refer to the screenshots in this podcast. Keep in mind that Connie Land was still grieving over the murder of her daughter Sydney, who had been murdered about 5 months prior to Tobiasson reaching out to her. Connie Land wanted answers to her daughter's unsolved murder when Tobiasson reached out to her in early May of 2017. The following are just a few examples of the many text message communications between Judge Tobiasson and Connie Land. I received these from Land in 2019, and she confirmed their authenticity. More to come in future podcasts. All of the following text messages occurred in 2017. Like I said before, Tobiasson provided plenty of information on Shane Valentine and other matters to Connie Land that Land was unaware of. Judge Tobiasson is not telling the truth, and these text messages will confirm that. May 13th, Tobiasson tells Land, Dosh apparently sucks. My comment on this one? Apparently Tobiasson was getting information from somebody to make a statement about a police detective's work performance, or it's a total fabrication. Continue on. Tobiasson states, haven't heard from Grimmett, but my other friend is in D.C. and promised he would call me first thing in the morning. My comment confirms what Land had said, that Tobiasson knew Grimmett and the friend in D.C., the FBI agent possibly. But FBI Special Agent Kevin White told the Judicial Commission investigator that he did not connect with Tobiasson until late 2017. However, Tobiasson could be lying just to impress Connie Land. Either way, it confirms what Land has said. Tobiasson continues, to Connie Land, my daughter knows Daj, D-A-J. Comment, just for the record, Daj is Daniel Stewart, the then boyfriend of Sidney Land's cousin, Lauren Harvey. Stewart is the person who discovered the bodies of Sidney Land and Nehemiah Kaufman on October 27, 2016, and then notified the police. Tobiasson told Land that Stewart is a pimp who tried to recruit her daughter Sarah into prostitution when she was attending Bishop Gorman High School. This is confirmed in text messages, and I will have more on this in a future episode on the unsolved Land Kaufman double homicide. July 18th, Tobiasson tells Land, I'm pretty disillusioned with the whole criminal justice system. My comment? It's a very nice statement coming from a city judge. July 22nd, Tobiasson tells Land, I haven't heard anything. I'm in Malibu till next Friday. I'll reach out to Grimmett when I get back. Comment, here we go again with Detective Jared Grimmett. That bolsters Land's veracity. August 27th, Tobiasson tells Land, it's awful, and when you feel that you are the only one who cares, it's a lonely place to be. I tried to get Vice to pay attention and listen and do something for 18 months, and they just couldn't be bothered. My comment, as I reported in a previous episode, Sheriff Joe Lombardo confirmed that Vice detectives did not follow up on information provided by Tobiasson, and then they had the murder outside of the top-notch clothing store / unlicensed club. Tobiasson, they were all involved in shit. Big time. Doesn't really matter. The result is the same. He was burglarizing houses with Shane. Probably like Shane, selling dope and trying to be a pimp. The impression I get from those who knew Neo was that he wasn't evil like Shane, but he was playing the game with sociopaths and people with no soul. My comment, Tobiasson is discussing Shane Valentine and Nehemiah Kaufman, one of the victims in the double homicide. Tobiasson continues on, I think Vice ignored me because they are dirty. 2 of the detectives I was giving information to are mixed up in the federal investigation where the Vice guys were having sex with prostitutes of the pimps they were investigating. Those pimps are going to get released as a result. Then they out me to one of Shane's girls. Have to wonder what their motivation was. Not really, I know. One was taking kickbacks from strip clubs. It's disgusting. My comment on this? Again, this bolsters Land's veracity about what the judge was telling her at the time. My guess is they aren't working on shit. My comment on this. Tobiasson is referencing the police investigation of the double homicide of Sidney Land and Nehemiah Kaufman. Tobiasson to Land. Same date. What I've learned over the last 2 to 3 years has completely changed me. I never wanted to believe that there was so much corruption and lack of ethics and decency. Life-changing. My comment? Again, bolsters Connie Land's veracity, and it's self-explanatory. September 26th, Tobiasson tells Land, I'm helping behind the scenes. Call every reporter in town, out of town. I will update you this week. My comment, again, bolsters Land's veracity. September 28th, Tobiason tells Land, well, the person I spoke to last night said when this hits, it's going to be huge. And he isn't even really dealing with the murder aspect of it yet. Connie Land replies, this will all come out. Will they help with Sydney's case too? Tobiason says, listen to this, folks. Your case automatically connects. My comment, Tobiason is referencing FBI Agent White. This once again bolsters Connie Land's veracity. Listen to what Tobiason told me the following year about it being huge and her discussion with Agent White.
You know, whether it makes sense to you or not, what it should say to you is this is bigger than I ever, this is stuff that they really, 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 really don't want to become public. That's what it should say to you, is that this shit is huge.
September 29, 2017. Tobiason, Texas Land. Was Dosh pissed? Fuck him. I'm so glad you went over his head. Comment? Unbelievable. This deserves no comment at all. Disgraceful. She continues. He should get in trouble, just like the jackasses who ignored me and allowed this to happen. He will make his own bed. They will audit him, and it won't look good. I promise. Comment? Apparently, Judge Tobiasson has plenty of influence because she promised Connie Land that Detective Dorsch will be audited. Money and power buys anything in Sin City, I guess. October 4th, Tobiasson tells Land, call Steve Wolfson first thing. I'll get his email. Send him an email as well. I'll write it. Points. He pimped out a judge's daughter and had two of his girls do a beatdown on her. Case was in about 2013. I was the judge. I'll get the transcript where she testifies. He was her pimp. He tried to pimp out another judge's daughter. He pimped out several police officers' daughters. He was certified up as a juvenile and went to prison for violent home invasions. They reduced the agreed-upon sentence in the 4 for which he's currently in prison, where they had him on videotape, and most importantly, he is the main suspect in the homicide of her son and your daughter, 3 weeks after the drive-by. Tell him she is calling every news agency in town. Comment. Here we have Judge Tobiasson telling Connie Land that she will write the email to Clark County District Attorney. She then continues on and tells Land details relating to Shane Valentine's criminal case. Again, bolsters Connie Land's veracity. Tobiasson continues on. PG discharging a firearm into structure and PG burglary, second offense, another case. GPA doesn't say whether it's right to argue, but I'm sure it is. I hate Mark DiGiacomo. Connie Land replies, WTF? What does this sentence mean? It will run concurrently with his current sentence, Connie asked. He will not serve any additional times? He could get out soon? Tobiasson replies, I don't know. I will find everything out. Comment. Tobiasson says she hates Clark County Deputy District Attorney Mark DiGiacomo. She is giving more information on Valentine's criminal case to Connie Land. Then she says that she will find everything out. Once again, there's more bolstering of Land's truthfulness throughout. Tobiasson continues, you should ask Neo's mom if they talked to her about negotiations. Land replies, they haven't called her. She knows nothing about any negotiation. Can they do that? She's the victim. Tobiasson replies, are you fucking kidding me? They are going to try to tell her, well, he's pleading straight up in our case. That's not the fucking point. And they closed the case saying insufficient evidence. Comment. More information to Land about Shane Valentine. Connie Land tells Tobiasson, same day. There are eyewitnesses who identified Shane in her driveway. He pointed a gun at him, and Shane told him to go into the fucking house and keep his mouth shut. Tobiasson replies, yes, ma'am. They reopened it after the murder because they saw the texts on Neo's phone and Cuntilla, a.k.a. Frankie, told them about it. My comment on this, that is also inside information coming from the police. That's the only way Tobiason could have known that. She is telling this to Land in 2017. Listen to what Tobiason told me in 2018.
Now, after the double homicide, they get Neo's phone, and there's like 40,000 text messages on it. Apparently, Neo never deleted his text. And there's text messages between Neo and Shane. There's text messages between Allie and Neo, confirming that she has an involvement with Neo, prostitution-related involvement with Neo. And there are many, many, many other text messages on this phone, but I'm advised of this by the detective working the case, that they have this information. They therefore reopen the drive-by shooting at Neo's mom's house on October 8th and subsequently filed charges against Shane for that, okay? Even though they didn't have enough evidence before. So, look, they really did. But I'm told that they have Domo's DNA, that Frankie's phone pings at the apartment, that they caught Frankie in all kinds of lies.
This, once again, confirms that Tobiason was giving information to Land. Connie Land didn't know anything about this until she was told by Tobiason. So, when Land speaks about Tobiason telling her she was getting information from Detective Grimmett, whom Tobiason refers to as the original detective, it further corroborates what Land has been saying. October 4, 2017, Connie Land tells Tobiason, "I just called Crime Stoppers and asked them what information they needed to report a crime. They said they either need the name of the victim or the location of the billboards or the event number. But if you get this information about a double homicide on October 27, 2016, they can't take it based on that information." Tobiason replies, "Fucking assholes." My comment on this: Judge Tobiasson, I throw that last comment right back in your face, because in my opinion, your lack of character and integrity is a disgrace to the robe you wear and the bench you sit on. October 5th, Tobiasson tells Land, "One more point for Neo's mom. Shane gives a proffer that results in zero movement on the case and still gets a reduced sentence on his burglary." Land replies, "Because Shane has dirt on them? What's a proffer?" Tobiasson replies, "Basically snitching. Gives the cops info to get a better deal." Comment: more information to Land that was provided by the judge, contrary to what Judge Tobiasson said in her written response to the Judicial Commission, further corroborates statements made by Connie Land. October 5th, Tobiasson tells Land, "I'm still not entirely convinced that the murders are connected to Allie, but based on those text messages between her and Chris, she is clearly still talking to Shane, and that could get my daughter killed." Land replies, "This is bad. Is your daughter still in communication with any of those people or Allie? Allie worked for Shane and Neo?" Land asked. So, in October 2017, Tobiasson is not entirely convinced that the murders are connected to Allie. Wow. Because in May 2018, she told me, as you heard previously in this podcast, that the murders had everything to do with her getting outed to Allie and her police officer father. Judge Tobiasson, let me ask you a question. Which version of your so-called truth is correct? The statement to Connie Land or the statement made to an investigative journalist in May 2018 when I was interviewing you? Tobiasson to Land, I think the reason Flores was still talking to me was to see what I knew. Now that I know the relationship, remind me to tell you the Spearmint Rhino connection. My comment. In my interview with Tobiasson, she told me that Judge Michelle Levitt's daughter was working at the Spearmint Rhino Gentlemen's Club and that it was Molly Mall's territory. I have no reason to doubt what Connie Land said Tobiasson told her about that. While I'm on the subject, in a December 23, 2018 email to me, Tobiasson wrote, quote, "Last Sunday night at 3 a.m., Judge Levitt sealed the records in Marlon Brown's case. No explanation. Sealed the bind-over from the preliminary hearing held in front of me 4 years later." Unquote. Comment, I don't know what legal significance that has. While I'm on the subject of Marlon Brown, listen to this audio excerpt from my interview with Judge Tobiasson.
if someone was to talk to Marlon Brown, I'll bet he'd tell him, I actually kind of like Marlon. Marlon actually protected my daughter. Now listen, if my daughter had been 18, I guarantee he wouldn't have. But he used to tell my daughter all the time, he's like, I have mad respect for your mom. She always treated us with respect. And we were in court with her.
Who is this guy? Which guy is this? Who is that guy?
He was a pimp. He was the one who owned Top Notch. But he wouldn't let my daughter drink. He wouldn't let her party. He would let her sit back there and load the hookahs. He let her hang out there, but according to her, he kind of shielded her from the other stuff. I don't think the guy deserves any freaking awards, but I do appreciate the fact he didn't beat my daughter up and put her out on the strip.
His first name is Marlon?
Yeah.
Marlon Brown?
I mean, he protected my daughter more than the cops did, I can tell you that.
My comment on this. That statement is one of the most demented comments I have ever heard coming from the mouth of a mother. By her own admission, Tobiason said she allowed her daughter Sarah, then an underage student at Bishop Gorman High School in Las Vegas, to frequent, then work in what Tobiason said was a clothing store fronting as an unlicensed strip club that was run by pimps. Then Tobiason has the gall to say that she was glad that the pimp didn't beat her daughter up and put her out on the Las Vegas Strip working as a prostitute. Disgusting. Sounds like a good case for contributing to the delinquency of a minor, at the least. Listen to this next audio clip.
So about July of 2015, my daughter starts hanging out at a place in what we call Chinatown here in Las Vegas called Top Notch. It was a hip-hop clothing store that when I looked into it, realized it was not really a clothing store. It was a front for an unlicensed club. And also that they, on a regular basis, had young local high school girls hanging out in the club, dancing. There were stripper poles in the back of the club. There was a full bar. There were, at night, if you watched the alley behind the club, you would see the people come in, typical Mercedes, Range Rovers, Bentleys, Rolls Royce, whatever. They'd all pull in and you'd see the people that were getting out, and you could see exactly what was going on. They would go in through the alley back door, and it was, in fact, an unlicensed club. Find out that the two men who were running this club, both are convicted pimps, and one of whom has had a case in front of me. He was a 34-year-old. I take that information to the police. I say, listen, these guys have young girls from, local high schools hanging out in here every night. And from my understanding, they're entertaining in this unlicensed club. So my daughter at some point says she's going to start working here. I tell her, I make it very clear it is not a legitimate business. And I make it very clear that she's risking a lot for our family by hanging out with these kind of people. I also am in a very precarious position because doing everything I can to keep it so that we have a relationship and I don't alienate her. So what I do is I allow her to go and work there, but I watch it. I sit, I watch while she's there. It's kind of like a hookah lounge / strip club. So I continue to tell the police this. I watch the back alley. I get plate numbers, vehicle makes and models, tell them what's going on, get the information on Marlon Brown and Red, and, express my concern repeatedly that there are 30-something-year-old pimps running this unlicensed club with all these underage girls hanging out there. I actually subsequently learned that there were cops who hung out at Top Notch at the club.
With the underage girls.
Mm-hmm.
My comment. That doesn't even deserve an explanation. As a parent, she can bring up her daughter any way she wants. That's nobody's business. But putting your own minor daughter's well-being in jeopardy by stepping one foot in an establishment like that, with her permission, is incomprehensible to me. Sarah Tobiasson went to Shane Valentine's house looking to purchase a counterfeit ID because someone at Top Notch had sent her there. Tobiasson stated in her response to the land complaint that her and her daughter were still in fear for their safety even after 5 years because of Shane Valentine. Now that may be justified. However, when juxtaposed with the fact that Sarah Tobiasson was working in an adult bookstore adjacent to a strip club in 2018, seems a little bizarre. I verified that through social media. I guess nowadays adult bookstores are called love boutiques. Enough on this one. Now, continuing on with the text messages. October 5th, 2017. Land tells Tobiason. Crime Stoppers has an issue with my billboard content. May need to modify. Tobiason replies, fuck them. What is their issue? October 6, 2017. Tobiason tells Land. Edit it to say he was out on bail at the time of the drive-by shooting and murder on the charge for which he is now serving time. He was arrested in Burbank. No, he was out on bail. They are watching you like a hawk. We need to get different phones tomorrow. Don't forget, by the time of the homicide, my daughter really wasn't hanging out with any of these people anymore, really. And yet that's who I found out about everything from. Certainly wasn't from the police. My comment? Tobiason told me that her daughter Sarah was friends with Nehemiah Kaufman, and that Sarah told her that Shane Valentine committed the murders. And Sarah, according to Tobiason, was with Allie after the meeting where Tobiason was outed by Vice, which Tobiason said happened about 8 hours prior to the Land Kaufman murders. Listen to the following audio clip.
I get the call from Van Cleef, who is beside himself. He goes, I don't know what to do. And I said, how about you get the fuck back in there and fix this? I go, she just put a fucking target on my daughter. I go, you think this guy's going to kill me? He's not going to kill me. He's going to kill my kid. I go, what is wrong with you people? I said, there is no way that this was an accident. I go, no vice detective, I don't care if they've been there for 1 day, would do that by accident. I go, this was intentional. And so he goes back into the interview. He calls me when the interview's over, and he's like, well, we talked to her, and we told her not to talk to your daughter about it. I go, are you an idiot? I go, she's on the phone with my daughter right now. I go, in fact, I'll bet you in 30 seconds I have a call from my daughter. Sure shit. I get a text message from my daughter. Are you serious? You called the police on us? So I bring my daughter and Allie to my house. I tell them, I go, you guys need to get to the house right now. You're not safe. So
you brought your daughter. You said you said you brought your daughter and who to your house?
Allie, the daughter of the police officer that they had just outed me to. Friday night, they find the bodies Thursday morning. Friday night at midnight, I come home from a concert, and my daughter comes to me and she says, Mom, I got to talk to you. She said, you know that double homicide when my friend Neo got shot? I said, yeah. She says, Shane did it. And I don't even ask her how she knows, because for some reason all the kids on the street know everything and the cops don't know shit.
Continuing on with the text messages. October 6, 2017. Connie Land then tells Tobiason, emailed you videos of Frankie. She is out recruiting girls like crazy. The girl that came over today is a super sweet girl Frankie has been reaching out to. Judge Tobiasson responds, you know what, Connie? Why don't we go do surveillance? My comment, Tobiasson should be well trained in surveillance. She told me during my interview with her and also admitted to other media that she was indeed conducting surveillance on unlicensed clubs and tracking people, which for those not familiar with police techniques, surveillance is conducting an investigation. Tobiason tells Land, send me everything you have and know. Had a long talk with a friend tonight. Again, Judge Tobiasson, send me everything you have and know. October 7th, 2017, Tobiasson tells Land, I'm so sorry I couldn't save your daughter. I tried. I really did. The reality of what happened to her and your family because of these motherfuckers. Not the pimps, the cops. They had everything they needed to get these predators before this happened. I'm a goddamn judge who did all their work for them, and they still didn't care. You know why? Because they don't think anyone will ever figure it out, and they are as bad as everyone has ever said. Worse. What I wonder is how they managed to get the female detectives to turn a blind eye. I'm so fucking mad. So once again, Tobiasson is putting in Connie Land's head that the police are corrupt, and because her daughter was dead because of police corruption. This is a sitting judge telling this to the mother whose daughter was killed several months prior. Land tells Tobiasson, I would like to draft up something that I can give to the news media in regards to Shane Valentine because I want to make sure he does not get a deal. Tobiasson replies, I'll write it. Sophia Faraci, co-defendant in case with the daughter that Shane Valentine was pimping out, died before hearing. Again, She is providing information to Connie Land, just like Connie Land has said over the last couple of years that she did not have, that the judge was giving her. Continues on, Tobiason. Maybe, just maybe, the universe put us together to tell the world how fucked up and corrupt and disgusting this shit is. How these vice squads are nothing more than enablers and mustaches for the money holders. The casinos don't want it to stop. They provide these girls to their clients. They cover up crimes against women by treating them like criminals that end ignoring the pimps. Cops make no money. Most people are motivated by money. A casino exec will always have enough money to buy a cop. They can pay them more in one day than they make in a year. They own them. Judge Tobiasson, what proof do you have that the casinos were paying off cops? I'd like to see that. October 8th, Tobiasson to Land. Send her the petition. That introduces her to Shane Valentine. Then after I talk to my friend, maybe we can write up a narrative. Here's the problem. If we tell the story, but leave out the names, those fuckers will give my name to them. I couldn't care less, but Sarah might kill me. She's talking about Connie Land providing information to a reporter, a female reporter in Las Vegas. Tobiasson to Land. Guess which police officers live on the same street? Comment, okay, this really pisses me off again. So Judge Tobiasson is conducting investigations into police officers and where they live. Is that proper conduct for a sitting judge to do? I've never heard of anything like this in my life before. Land tells Tobiasson. Adam Gill, who was Ocean Fleming's attorney, has taken over and is bundling these cases. Tobiasson replies, can't figure out how Adam got on the case. I'll get the details tomorrow. Once again, Judge Tobiasson will get private confidential details about a case and give it to, Connie Land. Tobiasson tells Land, at the end of the day, I really like the day of a lawsuit against the department. We would have to get someone like Gloria Allred. Here's the thing. They have immunity for many things, but if you can show intentional behavior that resulted in Sydney's death, i.e., failure to investigate exposing informants. My comment? Nothing like a judge being unbiased and impartial against the police department. October 9, 2017. Tobiasson tells Land, Knapp is the way to go. Dear Mr. Knapp, I am pleading with you to look into the cases of Shane Valentine. The DA's office is currently negotiating his cases and agreeing to concurrent time and to dismiss other charges. Shane Valentine has been. And she says, I'll type something up tomorrow. Again, Judge Tobiasson is telling Connie Land what to put into a letter to George Knapp from 8 News Now, Las Vegas. I guess that's proper conduct for a judge to do. I don't know. Okay? And then comment, clearly Judge Tobiasson is telling Land what to write to 8 News Now reporter George Knapp. Query, like I said, should a sitting judge be engaging in this type of behavior? I've never heard anything like this before. October 10, 2017, Tobiasson tells Land, ask her if Flores ever behaved inappropriately with her. I'm going to get into that in another podcast. October 12, 2017, Land asks Tobiasson, how do I look up Shane Valentine's criminal record? Is that public record? Tobiasson replies, his scope isn't, but you can look him up under NDOC and get what he was in prison for. He was certified as a juvenile and did 3 years for home invasion. He says he was certified up as a juvenile and did 3 years for home invasion. Again, she's given Connie Land information Connie didn't have. October 14, 2017, Tobiasson tells Land, you have no reason to feel like an idiot. They are corrupt assholes. It wouldn't have mattered how you treated them. Again, Tobiasson thinks the cops are corrupt assholes. Great, coming from a sitting judge. October 17th, Tobiasson tells Land, we have all the right people in place. Again, we have all the right people in place. Tobiasson to Land. October 18th, Tobiasson tells Land, what did you use to buy these phones? Land replies, my card at Target, debit card. Judge Tobiasson replies, we might need to get other ones. They might be able to trace them to the card. Tobiasson tells Land, do not talk to Knapp again. 3 exclamation points on the text message. Land tells Tobiasson, question, do you trust your friend completely? Tobiasson replies, 1,000%. Connie Land told me she's referring to FBI Special Agent Kevin White. She did not know his name at the time, but she's referring to the FBI agent that Judge Tobiasson was calling her friend. October 20th, Tobiasson tells Land, I haven't heard much today. We kind of have to sit tight right now. I have a plan. Need everything you have, texts and emails. Do you have the contents of the text between you and Dosh? I have the record of the text. I would like the content. Query. Is this appropriate conduct for a judge to be engaging in? If that's not meddling into a homicide investigation, I don't know what is. Asking for the confidential communications between a homicide detective and a family member of a murdered girl. This is all wrong. Why was Tobiasson so concerned about the private details that were shared? What Tobiasson should have told Connie Land from the very beginning is that she could not get involved in any of this. When I was on the job, I never heard of anything like this in my life. Keep in mind that Judge Tobiasson is not only a sitting judge, but she's a former Clark County Deputy District Attorney. She knew that asking for and or receiving those confidential text messages from a homicide detective who was investigating an unsolved double murder was not only inappropriate, but she would be compromising a police investigation. All of the lies that Tobiasson has told. With all that aside, I believe that what Tobiasson did by accepting those text messages is reason enough to get her removed from the bench and disbarred. Tobiasson had no business at all meddling into the investigation, and that is exactly what she did by taking possession of those text communications between Detective Mitchell Dosh and Connie Land. And nobody is going to convince me otherwise. Further, in June of 2018, one of those text messages ended up in an article written by Tobiasson's friend, Dana Gentry of the Nevada Current. The only way Gentry could have received that text message was from Judge Tobiasson, because Connie Land told me she did not provide it. The text message that appeared in the article mentioned Detective Dosh. By coincidence, I'm sure. I don't know what Tobiasson has against Dosh, and with that, Tobiasson's vindictiveness has no bounds. Continuing on, Tobiasson tells Land, do not leak anything right now. Comment, Tobiasson is the one running the show here. In my opinion, this is so highly unethical. October 21st, Tobiasson tells Land, you need to stop everything for a while and trust that the right people are doing the right things. Connie, I would never give you false hope. I am sitting at a table with the Hollywood producer. Guess what we will be talking about. Comment, okay, now we have a Hollywood producer entering the equation. Listen to the following audio clip. Okay, I'm online with Ramsey Dennison, producer, director of the two documentaries, Money Machine and What Happened in Vegas. Ramsey, October 21st of 2017, did you have contact with Las Vegas Justice Court Judge MELANIE ANDRESS-TOBIASSON out here in Las Vegas?
Yeah, I mean, I believe it. Yeah, I did. I don't know if it was October 21st specifically, but I did. We definitely met up just because that's 3 years ago. You know what I mean? But around that time frame, you know, I at that point thought MELANIE ANDRESS-TOBIASSON was a hero. I really admired her going on that program and kind of calling out the LVMPD. And so I wanted to meet with her, and we did, and we went to Capo's Italian restaurant in Tropicana, and I sat down with her, and we were discussing, you know, working together to expose corruption. She had some, you know, she really said some pretty incredible things in that George Knapp 8 News story. And so I wanted to say, like, listen, like, let's expose, you know, let's take this a bit further than some little 4 or 5 minute story, you know?
Right.
And we sat down for a long time, and she laid out the whole thing to me. And it seemed like every third or fourth word was a squash word with her. It was odd because I'm like, this woman's a judge and she's swearing like a sailor. And I've heard other people say that as well. But anyway, not to get off track here. But yeah, we sat down and we had a good meeting, and she laid out kind of the whole thing for me Shane Valentine and all this. And quite honestly, my head was spinning because it was complicated. There was a lot to this story. And I kept telling her, listen, this is really complex. If we're going to make a film about this, we need to really kind of make it clear and explain the players better. And so I believed that we were going to work together on that. Right. And then all of a sudden it just, she did to me what she's done to many other people and just kind of like backed out mysteriously and oddly. And then as I just started talking to other people, I saw that was a pattern with her. And so I kind of started to wonder what was really going on, Did
she tell you at that meeting that she ended up didn't want anything to do with it, or was it sometime later on?
No, it was like me following up with her and then her kind of like sidestepping it or peddling it or, oh, I'm not ready to do that right now. And then actually after that, because we were on Facebook, Facebook friends, there was another time where she talked about wanting to, so even after that first kind of flake out is what I'd call it, there was a second thing where, and gosh, I probably still have the messages of this and stuff on Facebook or whatever. I mean, unless she deactivated her account, but it was like about like, oh, there was another thing where she wanted to do it again. And then after that, it just kind of trailed off. I think I don't feel like I've seen her on Facebook for a while, so I'm not even sure. I think she probably deactivated her account, but I never really followed up with her after that because, I just figured that the same thing would happen. It would be she gets hot to do it, and then all of a sudden she doesn't want to do it.
Okay, Ramsey, thanks for that information. I'll put it into this podcast that I'm doing.
And so just to make clear, Doug, one thing, I'm not 100% sure that it was October 21st. Okay. Just because like 3 years ago, you wouldn't remember the exact date either, probably, unless it was a historic date. But I believe it was probably around that time frame.
Okay.
And that would have had to have been me she was talking about.
Right. When KLAS-TV, 8 News Now, Las Vegas, aired portions of Judge Tobiasson's interview with them in April of 2018, many thought that Tobiasson was a whistleblower. In effect, she was to some extent. But was she really? Because what many don't know is that Tobiasson never wanted that interview to be aired. And in fact, as I have stated and shown in a previous podcast, Tobiasson threatened KLAS-TV with legal action if they aired any more of her interview. This is what Tobiasson told me in 2018.
Let me ask you a question, Melanie. I saw the interview that you did with Channel 8 I-Team.
Yeah.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Is everything that's on that interview is what you told them, or was that an edited version of your interview?
Oh, no, that tape was never intended to be public. I made that tape in the event that I was dead and couldn't tell my story. My attorney wanted me to videotape my story. It's about 4 hours, maybe 5, in the event that someday I needed it for my protection, or in the event that I wasn't around to tell the story.
So, the 8 News Now recorded interview was never intended to go public. Keep that in mind for a minute. If I understand Tobiasson correctly, a television news crew sat down with her for 4 to 5 hours and recorded her story just in case something happened to her. But if nothing did, they couldn't use it. They were going to keep it sealed forever. Maybe KLAS-TV did do that, but it sounds preposterous to me. Her and her attorney could have hired a private videographer to do that, but who knows? Listen to what Judge Tobiasson said while testifying in December of 2019 before the Nevada Commission on Judicial Discipline, when she was asked about my on-the-record recorded interview with her. And by the way, a reporter from the Nevada Current, her friend Dana Gentry, and David Ferrara from the Las Vegas Review-Journal, they covered the hearing in December 2019 just as I did. But they failed to mention anything in their stories about my interview and what Tobiasson testified to about that. Strange, isn't it? Well, not really. 2 words, confirmation bias. Listen to this audio clip from the December 2019 hearing.
To be accused of that?
And you told the investigator the allegations that you threatened people is completely out of the realm of comprehension. Do you recall that?
Yes, I do.
Because I would never engage in that kind of behavior. That's what you told him, correct?
Correct.
But that's not true, is it? In fact, you have bragged about threatening people, haven't you?
No.
Did you give an interview to the Baltimore Post-Examiner in 2018? She denies she ever threatened someone. She admits that she threatened someone in a newspaper article, and there's an audio recording of it.
I'm not permitting this. Go ahead.
Did you give an interview to the Baltimore Post-Examiner in 2018?
Very unfortunately, yes.
And they recorded the interview, correct?
It was a recording of a conversation. It was never intended to be published.
At least Tobiasson is consistent after she gives interviews to journalists. She cowers, and then she says they were not to be made public. But it doesn't end there. There is more. Listen to this next audio clip.
You have Lombardo, and I didn't find out about it till after the story aired, talking to my attorney, suggesting that I'm involved in criminal activity and suggesting that they're going to file charges against me. And my attorney tells me, I think we need to do the story. He doesn't tell me why. He just says, I think we need to air the story.
Right.
I said, I agree. I said, I don't know what the fuck we're waiting for. Let's do it. I wanted to do it 6 months ago. And so they aired the story.
And that was on April
In response.
April 13th when they aired it.
Yes.
You just heard Tobiasson say to me on May 7th of 2018 that she gave 8 News Now permission to air the story and that she wanted to do it 6 months prior. 4 months after my interview with Judge Tobiasson on September 10th, 2018, Tobiasson was interviewed by Judicial Commission investigator Bob Schmidt. The interview was audio recorded. According to the transcript of that recorded interview that I have, Tobiasson told Schmidt the complete opposite of what she told me about the 8 News Now interview. Tobiasson tells Schmidt, quote, "That video was never intended for public consumption, and when they contacted me to tell me they were going to do the story, I had said to them this wasn't recorded in order to use it," unquote. Schmidt asked Tobiasson, quote, "How much notice did they give you before the thing was actually on the news?" Unquote. Tobiasson replied, quote, "About a day," unquote. Comment. With Tobiasson, apparently it's difficult to ascertain where the truth ends and the lies begin. So, which was it, Judge Tobiasson? You gave 8 News Now permission to air the interview because you wanted to do it 6 months prior, like you told me? Or it was never intended for public consumption, like you told Mr. Schmidt? I guess we will never know which version of your truth is the correct one. Also, during that interview with Schmidt, he asked Tobiasson if there was anything else about Shane Valentine. She said no. But she failed to disclose to Schmidt that she had threatened Shane Valentine through his attorney, and then she went to Valentine's home and kicked in the door. Tobiasson withheld that information from Schmidt. Listen to this audio clip.
So I contact Shane Valentine's attorney. It's about July now of 2016. And because I know that the cops at this point aren't going to do anything, I call his attorney and I said, hey, you might want to get your client about this, that if he calls my daughter again, I'm going to take care of it myself. So he does. He gives them the message. We don't really want to report that. I was the one who went to Shane Valentine's house, kicked in the door.
Last month, Judge Tobiasson was deposed by the Nevada Commission on Judicial Discipline. In that deposition, Tobiasson testified that she never kicked in the door to Shane Valentine's residence, as you just heard her tell me during my interview with her. She testified in that deposition, quote, "I went to the house and never got out of the car," unquote. Comment. Once again, which version of Tobiasson's truth is this? The one she gave to an investigative journalist on the record, me, in 2018? Or which she stated in that November deposition, possibly a veiled attempt to cover her butt? At the time, did she file a police report on Shane Valentine for the threats to her daughter? Did she obtain a restraining order for Valentine? Wouldn't that have been the proper course of action, especially for someone in Tobiasson's position? If that's all it was, just like Tobiasson said, then why after the story was published on January 21st, 2019, did Tobiason send me the following emails. Tobiason, I already have a discipline complaint. Can you delete the parts about me contacting his attorney, please? Poppa, what part are you talking about with the attorney? Tobiason, contacting Shane's attorney. Judicial discipline would use this to remove me from the bench. As I stated at the beginning of this podcast, I was not the editor or publisher of the Baltimore Post-Examiner who published the story. I expressed Tobiason's concerns to him, and the story stood as it was. Judge Tobiasson's on-the-record recorded interview with me was never off the record. Not once during the entire interview did Tobiasson say, "Turn off the recording, we are going off the record." To the contrary, she stated during the interview that she knew I had the recording and I was going to use it, and she confirmed that in a later email. Now, continuing on with the text messages. October 23rd, 2017, Connie Land X. Tobiasson. What did your FBI friend say when you told him that redacted? I have redacted some information here because I'm still conducting my investigation and I believe it relates to the woman Tobiasson told me in the interview she was talking to who runs the group called Sesame. That was the woman who Tobiasson told me introduced her to FBI Special Agent Kevin White. Continuing, Tobiasson replies, perhaps we should not reference what he does in text. Connie Land tells Tobiasson, Melanie, I have placed my search for Sydney's killers in your hands. I know you want justice and exposure just as I do. I connected you to Ariane in an effort to expose the corruption in Metro and to help fill in missing pieces. I am not sure what you discuss. You ask me not to say things to her, and I'm sure you tell her not to say things to me. It raises concerns as to why you were doing so. I also don't appreciate blatant lies. It makes me question someone's integrity and motives. If we want the truth to come out, then there has to be transparency and trust amongst us. We all have a common goal. We have all shown each other our openness and honesty. In order to accomplish what needs to be done, we need to remain honest and open with each other, or doubt and suspicion will interfere, as it is already showing by the conversations today. I have never spoken to you disrespectfully. You didn't need to come at me like that. I have never spoken to you like that and never will. I expect the same courtesy. Nothing will stop me from uncovering the entire truth about what happened to Sydney. You've never confirmed your friend is even working on her murder. Police corruption will not prove who killed her. Mel, if they have DNA evidence and blood from Damo in the bathroom of Sydney's apartment and can tie him to the murder, why hasn't he been arrested? Same with Frankie. Grimmett told you they have information they've been waiting on that proves Frankie was lying and can place her at the apartment at the time of the murder. Why haven't they arrested her or brought her in for questioning? My comment. One last thing on text messages for this podcast. On February 28, 2017, then Las Vegas Metro Police Vice Detective Greg Flores sent the following text message to Connie Land. I've been doing this job a long time. I have found Ariane to be incredibly honest, even about things that could potentially get her in trouble over. I will have much more on text messages between Tobiasson and Land, on Tobiasson's written response to the Judicial Commission referenced the Land complaint, and Tobiasson's deposition that she gave to the Judicial Commission last month. October 23, 2017, according to Connie Land, is the day she broke off contact with Judge Tobiasson. I will have more on that in a future episode. The next day, October 24, 2017, Connie Land contacted Las Vegas Metro Police Homicide Detective Mitchell Dorsch and expressed her concerns about Tobiasson's actions. The following are a few examples of text messages between Connie Land and Homicide Detective Mitchell Dorsch. October 24, 2017. Land texted Dorsch, Detective Dorsch, it is very important that I speak with you. Tobiasson told me she needs all correspondence of my communication with you, emails, text messages, phone calls. I sent them to her. She asked for any information we have on Sydney to send to her. I sent her everything. There are no words I can even say. Dorsch replied, I have notified my sergeant. He will be contacting you tomorrow. October 25, 2017. Land. Detective, she has been investigating you. She was at her office at 12:30 a.m. looking up information about you. Dorsch replies, "Who?" Land says, "Tobiasson." Dorsch, "Why is the judge investigating me? I'm confused." Land, "I don't know. She told me your home address. You lived on the same street as Dano about 8 years ago. I don't remember address. You lived like 8 houses from one another." Dorsch replies, "I only interacted with that guy once, maybe twice in my career. I don't know him. I still don't know why she's investigating me. I am super confused, Connie. I have not done anything wrong. I have investigated your daughter's death as hardened and diligently as I have done with other investigations. I'm not sure where any of this comes from and why all of this is going on." Land replied, "Melanie called me about 12:30 to 1 o'clock a.m. from her office. She told me she was looking up some things. She said you lived on the same street as Dano. Something, I redacted, I think." Land replied, "She wanted every communication between us. To not trust you. I am so sorry. This is Sydney's anniversary, and I'm dealing with this fucked up mess." Dorsch replied, "I know this is a difficult time, but how do we get to a point where a judge is investigating me? This is what I don't understand. Who said I was dirty? Was it you?" Land replied, "No. Melanie told me you were. She told me she has been working with the FBI, whom she called her friend. Detective, she reached out to me 1st of May. She said from the beginning you have not wanted to investigate this. Grimmett was very upset when he suggested different things to try. He was taken off the case. A month into it, there is so much." Okay, comment here. Before I go any further, what Connie Land is telling Detective Dorsch in that text message in 2017 about Tobiasson telling her that Grimmett was taken off the case is the exact same thing that Tobiasson told me in 2018 during my interview with her. Listen to this short audio clip.
He was a suspect in the murders. They have all the evidence they need to make arrests in the murders. I told you about the detective who was originally on the case, who told me all the evidence they had that showed it was Shane, Domo, and Frankie. Okay?
Right.
A month after the double homicide, they take him off the case. That never happens. If you start a murder case, you finish a murder case unless you retire. They take him off the case. They make another detective the lead detective. His name is Mitch Dosh.
You just heard what Tobiasson just said. I have been dealing with Connie Land and her family for almost 2 years. I can say this without any equivocation whatsoever, that Connie Land speaks the truth. Her integrity, as far as I'm concerned, is impeccable. Connie has never lied to me during the entire time I have known her. Tobiasson's integrity, on the other hand, in my opinion, is in the gutter. She is a liar, and I proved that in this podcast. She obviously has a vendetta against Detective Dorsch for whatever real or imagined reason. She's despicable and a disgrace to the robe she wears. Now, let's continue on with the text messages. Dorsch replied, "I have no words." Land replies, "I am really embarrassed to have you read the text messages. I was so angry. Honestly thought you were all corrupt." Dorsch replied, "I'm not. I've never been. I look forward to defending myself against false accusations." Land responded, "I emailed you all I have. I am so embarrassed. She told me you were monitoring me. She told me we needed burner phones because the police may have a wiretap and can't be trusted." On April 13, 2018, Connie Land texted Detective Dorsch. She referenced Grimmett countless times throughout the 6 months we were in communication. She said he is the only one I can trust. I'm not saying anything one way or the other, but you need to know these things. I'm not sharing this information to cast doubt, but I need you to know the communication and things that Melanie Tobiasson was saying in regards to Detective Grimmett. On April 20th, 2018, Connie Land text message to Dorsch. "Detective, I hate to say this, but I have a very strong feeling Grimmett is feeding information to the judge. I have a nauseating feeling he is bad. I know you do not want to believe that. It is not a coincidence after 18 months, Frankie reaches out and going on the assault. You nor Grimmett knew what me and Ari said in the interview, but the same week or so, you see the show and interviews, the judge goes on TV and wreaks havoc. Frankie says she knows I have spoken to a reporter. Melanie told me Grimmett was providing her the information from the case, DNA, Damo, etc. She told me the only person I can trust is Grimmett. The first time I met her, she had information I never heard. Greg Flores, Grimmett, and the judge are very good friends. Flores told us that. None of the things happening are a coincidence. After 18 months, Frankie reaches out, and 6 months after a silent judge goes crazy. I'm sorry, I have heard too many things she said about Grimmett. Someone close to this case continues to feed Melanie what is going on. Dorsch replies, in my opinion, Melanie has lost her mind. Also, I trust Grimmett with my life. He is a good and righteous man, with the victim's best interests at heart. Lan responds, I'm sorry to have questioned your integrity before, and I'm questioning his. I'm looking at every scenario and the history she shared with me about her and Grimmett's communications. I can't help but feel he has provided info to her, even if thought to be innocent. She is pure evil. On April 27, 2018, Dorsch sends the following text message to Connie Land. So many things happened since the murder happened that I've never seen before and I had zero control over. I won't get into them, but they are well chronicled. Detective Grimmett and I are left to pick up the pieces and work toward a successful outcome despite all the quote things, unquote, that have happened along the way. We are not going away. On September 20th, 2018, Dorsch texted Lan. That interview was done by vice detectives who outed the judge in the interview. We believe that's when the judge became furious with the department and our tone changed and she would not even allow us to interview her daughter. And now, my closing comments for this episode. Las Vegas Justice Court Judge Melanie ANDRESS-TOBIASSON, in my opinion, based on everything I have presented here, is a disgrace to the robe she wears and the bench she sits on. By Tobiasson's own words and text messages, she has humiliated herself and has taken the honor out of, quote, your honor, unquote. Her conduct was appalling. She meddled into a double homicide investigation by her own admission, and with the help of the police, according to her, and in doing so compromised a now 4-year-old unsolved double homicide. By Tobiasson's own admission, she took possession of confidential text communications between Connie Land and Detective Mitchell Dorsch. Tobiasson exercised extremely poor judgment, in the least, in doing so. Juxtapose that with Judge Tobiasson being a former prosecutor, her actions were incomprehensible. Tobiasson can spin that all she wants, but the end result is the same. Tobiasson inserted herself into the double homicide investigation, and that there is no doubt whatsoever. The negative comments she made about Las Vegas Metro police officers and others confirms she is not unbiased and impartial, and in my opinion, compromises her role as a judge. The public expects judges to be of high moral fiber, and that includes ethical behavior and conduct, not only when they are presiding over cases in court, but also in their private lives, which includes professional conduct when interacting with the public. Melanie ANDRESS-TOBIASSON has shown that she is a liar on many levels and about many things. Two rights don't make a wrong, and Judge Tobiasson has done many things wrong. Tobiasson lied to the Nevada Commission on Judicial Discipline in her response to the land complaint. Tobiasson made statements to me as an investigative journalist who was interviewing her for a story that she wanted to get out. Many statements which now conflict with what she told others, including an investigator for the commission who interviewed her in September of 2018. If all that is not bad enough, let's revisit a few audio excerpts from my interview with Tobiasson.
Nobody has been arrested in the murders. I told you that. He was a suspect in the murders. They have all the evidence they need to make arrests in the murders. I told you about the detective who was originally on the case who told me all the evidence they had that showed it was Shane, Domo, and Frankie.
So has anybody been indicted for this double murder?
No, that's what I just said. They're covering it up. So I bring my daughter and Ollie to my house. I tell them, I go, you guys need to get to the house right now. You're not safe. So
you brought your daughter. You said you brought your daughter and who to your house?
Allie, the daughter of the police officer that they had just outed me to. So that night, unbeknownst to me at this time, Allie leaves my house and she puts out a tweet about the fact that she was called in and questioned by Vice. Mm-hmm. Okay? Now, unfortunately, at this point, Allie was no longer associated with Shane Valentine. She was associated with Neo Kaufman. And like I said, they had had a beef because Shane was upset that Neo was taking Shane's goals. Daniel Giersdorf is the stepfather of Frankie Zappia, one of the suspects in the double homicide that happened 8 hours after I was outed as a source of information to one of Shane Valentine's prostitutes who had left him and was now working for Neo. 8 hours later, her new pimp is killed by her old pimp because she puts out on Twitter that she had been called in and interviewed by Vice. They know, and everyone else knows, that this murder happened as a result of what they did that day. Because I have a whole file that's like 4 feet thick. You know, now they're trying to cover up the homicide where Shane Valentine is a suspect. The problem is they don't know that I know what evidence they have. Chances are they've destroyed it by now.
You just heard those audio excerpts, and you heard others throughout this podcast. Listen up, people. This is nuts. This is crazy. We have a sitting judge who told me, you just heard her own voice again, not Doug Poppa, Judge Tobiasson, in her own words, stating that there is a cover-up in the murders of Sidney Land and Nehemiah Kaufman. Tobiasson is already a documented liar. The question is, how far does she go with her lies, and is she lying about the murders? Because if Tobiasson isn't lying about the unsolved murders, then, my friends, we have one big freaking problem within the Las Vegas Metro Police, and a conspiracy to cover up the homicides by the police. I don't know what the truth is. I cannot read Judge Tobiasson's mind. But what I can tell you right now, that Judge Melanie ANDRESS-TOBIASSON's credibility with me is in the sewer. Judge Tobiasson, if you have this 4-foot-thick file and the evidence as you say you have that proves a cover-up, then why haven't you produced it? Don't you think, Judge Tobiasson, that the families of Sidney Land and Nehemiah Kaufman at the very least deserve answers as to what is going on? How dare you make statements like that and then remain silent for over 2 years? Now, listen to this next audio clip.
And they know that the fact that they outed me got 2 people killed. They weren't the 2 people they were trying to get killed, me and my daughter, but it got 2 people killed. I tell you, Joe does not want this story out there.
When Judge Tobiasson said they were trying to get her and her daughter killed, the they she was referring to was the police, the vice detective who outed her, whom Tobiasson said was then Vice Detective Justine Gaddis. We know Tobiasson was outed because Homicide Detective Mitchell Dorsch told that to Connie Land in the text message. Other than that, I do not know what exactly happened in that meeting, because I only have Tobiasson's account of what happened so far. Be that as it may, Tobiasson goes further and says that the wrong 2 people were killed. She is talking about Sidney Land and Nehemiah Kaufman. Judge Tobiasson, I, along with the Land and Kaufman families, would like to know what information you have that leads you to believe that instead of you and your daughter Sarah being killed, it ended up with Sidney and Neo. What's the goddamn connection here? The only link I see is that you said Sarah was friends with Neo, and that Sarah, your daughter, and Allie were both together after you were outed, and they both came over your house, and then you said that Allie left sometime in the night and put out a tweet that you say resulted in the murders 8 hours later. My questions to you, Judge Tobiasson, are these. Was Sarah with Allie when she left your house, and if so, where did they go? I would also like to know how you knew, by your own words, Judge Tobiasson, that the murders occurred at 12:30 a.m. on October 26, 2018. Who told you that? Your daughter, Allie, or the police who were providing confidential information to you? I don't want to get too far off track here, because I'm already over 2 hours in this podcast, and I will be discussing the Land Kaufman murders again in another episode. Too many cops' kids surrounding this murder investigation. Frankie Zappia, who is the stepdaughter of now retired Las Vegas Metro Police Officer Daniel Giersdorf, Allie Bowden, daughter of Police Officer Clarence Ty Bowden, and Sarah Tobiasson, whose father, the judge's husband, is retired Sergeant Murray Todd Tobiasson. I just remembered something. On December 14, 2018, I received an email from a Metro police officer who was in contact with Judge Tobiasson. That email is as follows. The judge asked me to relay some information to you. The model/girlfriend dead in her high-rise condo was a very high-dollar call girl who was a federal witness in the probe of Baughman and Bias, etc. LVMPD investigated and ruled it a suicide. FBI believes it was a murder. The victim happens to be Murray Toby Tobiasson's cousin. Wow. I don't know if that's true or not, but it sounds very familiar, especially since it allegedly came from Judge Tobiasson. Because as you remember, Ariane Zappia claimed that Judge Tobiasson told her that the judge's brother's death was not a suicide but a murder. And according to Ariane, the judge also told her that Ariane's sister's death was also not a suicide but a murder. Very strange. A few more comments and I'm going to close this episode out. When Tobiasson said in that last audio clip that, quote, Joe doesn't want this out there, unquote, Tobiasson was referring to Clark County Sheriff Joe Lombardo, who runs the LVMPD. Just for sake of argument, let's say that documented liar Judge Melanie ANDRESS-TOBIASSON is telling the truth on this one, and that there is a cover-up involving the murders within the LVMPD. Who the hell at Metro is going to investigate a cover-up orchestrated by the sheriff if Tobiasson is indeed telling the truth? And I have my doubts. Nobody, that's who. Nobody within Metro, that is. Maybe the FBI? I don't have a lot of faith lately in them either, and that's pretty freaking sad. Let me make something very clear here. I'm a former cop. I do not believe that every police officer at Metro is corrupt. That is absurd, and anyone who believes that needs to go get their head examined. As for Shane Valentine, he is a scumbag. And by the way, he's being released from Nevada State Prison in a few days and will be under supervision. Anyone who has been following my investigative journalism work for the past few years knows that I'm not a fan of Joe Lombardo. I was going to discuss homicide detective Jared Grimmett and the comments he made to the commission's investigator. However, I will cover that in my next episode. Even if you remove Judge Tobiasson from the equation, the police investigation into the unsolved murders of Sidney Land and Nehemiah Kaufman was compromised separate and apart from Judge Tobiasson. That investigation was and is a disgrace. If you remember from a previous podcast, I reported that Las Vegas Metro Police criminal intelligence detectives had Tobiasson under investigation in 2017 and determined that Tobiasson communicated with or attempted to communicate with 2 convicted drug traffickers. More on that in a future podcast. This is an email that Tobiasson sent to a retired Metro Police detective in May of 2018, and he forwarded to me. Quote, the irony that I will have to rely on pimps and outlaws to protect me from cops and prosecutors, when you realize that the bad guys aren't really all that bad, and they have far more honor than the good guys, unquote. Melanie ANDRESS-TOBIASSON, you do not deserve my respect as a judge, and therefore I will no longer address you as such. So, you believe, Tobiasson, that the bad guys have more honor than the good guys. I am sure every police officer at Metro truly appreciates that. And you have to rely on pimps and outlaws to protect you? Really? Your husband is a retired Metro sergeant with over 20 years of service, and you have to rely on criminals for protection? In my opinion, besides being a liar, Judge Tobiasson, I wasn't going to use that name, okay? Tobiasson is hiding something, and Tobiasson is B-A-D and W-R-O-N-G. I said earlier that the information in this podcast could get Judge Tobiasson removed from the bench and possibly disbarred. Now I changed the word from could to should. That's it for this episode. Thanks for listening.